Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's webinar. I have some guests here. We've got
Howdy.
Pat. If we could just do a quick little sort of IT check, and if everyone can hear us and see us fine, just write a little comment in the question box and make yourself familiar with where to ask questions. Awesome. Thanks for tuning in and spending your Wednesday evening with us. And today we're going to talk about why it's so important to pull out equity from properties and how it all works. So I just realised I had a jumper on. I never wear a jumper. And my team know if I'm wearing a jumper.
I never wear a tie, so you know.
Yeah,
it's all right.
I'm going to take my jumper off, guys. So just bear with me for 2 seconds. We're not all expecting a strip show today. So yeah, today we're going to talk about why it's important to pull out equity and lots of cool things to talk about. Some of the things we're going to cover off on is firstly, I want to introduce you to my investor relation team, who are the face of the business, are here to help the community and the team, everyone in the community build their portfolios. So it's good just to be able to put a face to who you're talking to and all that sort of stuff, and talk about equity. Louise says you can't hear. I think everyone else can hear. If anyone else can't hear, just write a message, but I think everyone else can hear us. Pros to pulling out equity, what risks are involved, how to use equity, and looking at some examples of this. So just tonight, we've got only a part of our team here this evening. So we've got Gemma, we've got Pat here, and we've got Matt, who'll be on shortly as well. Jeremy, which a lot of you may not have met beforehand, he is a big character. He's actually a bit unwell at the moment, so we want to make sure he's taking care of himself, so he's not here. And Wayne couldn't make it to be with us this evening. So with it, we've got Pat. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Pleasure.
Make sure you're in the screen so everyone can see you and all that.
Hello, everyone.
Keeping our social distance of about 1.5 centimetres away from each other.
Invisible wall going here, so it's all right.
Yeah, we're going to wear our masks. So I just had someone here say I should join OnlyFans. Take them off. So yeah, probably not.
What's that?
Need to go to the gym a little bit before that happens. So yeah, just Pat, thanks for hanging back and joining the community. With it, what are your hobbies outside of work? Maybe tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So before I came here, I was a full-time musician of all things. So I still play drums and was a full-time drummer, traveling across the country and internationally as well. I was lucky enough to do some cool stuff overseas. And so yeah, so that took up my time and my thoughts and focus for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, playing music. Came back from overseas and thought it'd be a good time to get a real job because I got married and had some kids and whatnot. So yeah, so I had a job in the city and then bought a place not too far from the B.Invested HQ. And then I think you were looking to expand the team.
Yeah. And
reached out, and here I am. And that was a bit over a year ago.
Yeah. We grew massive throughout Corona. Yeah. It's been great. So
so yeah, happy to be here. It's awesome. I love what I do every day and love talking to everyone who comes through. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, cool. And why did you want to join working with business? Like what?
Well, look, for me,
our story actually goes back further.
Yeah. So for me, I've been following this bloke for I don't know, probably a decade now.
Yeah,
and back in, I think it was 2013, came in for a map session. Back then it was a group map session. So there was myself, my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time. Well, girlfriend at the time, wife now. And yeah, we came in for the group map session and did that. So that goes back 8 years or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been following B.Invested for ages. When the opportunity came up to work here, I jumped at it. So yeah.
Cool. And I've seen that there's some people commenting here. We've got Michael here saying Pat's earning his money with me recently. Good on you, Patty. So you've got some love there in the audience.
Good on you,
if there's anyone that's that Pat helps on a day-to-day basis that wants to ask him a question while we've got him here, feel free to flick a question through to him. Maybe like if we could look at 2 or 3 different sort of scenarios just over the course of the last year of the people that you've come to, and maybe a couple of things that you've learned over the last year. I know equity is probably one of the biggest ones. You're constantly seeing different things happening between the finance team, the legal team, the acquisitions of the properties, and pulling out all the equity and whatnot. Maybe if you could share with the community maybe a couple of things that you've learned, but then also a couple cool stories that you've seen from your clients.
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest takeaway for me, and this began on day one and it goes up to today as well, is I find that the biggest obstacle for people, sometimes it's out of our control, but it is finance. If we can do everything we can to set up finance as best we can prior to going into purchases, that will really make the process a lot smoother. But like I said, everyone, different banks have different criterias, different individuals have different income streams, and they're all monitored differently by the banks. So sometimes people can get through real quick. Sometimes people take 4, 5, 6 months to even go through. And that can be a bit taxing on people and on the whole process. So
someone just seen you at Spa last question here, and it took them 7 months to get their finance, and there's got four properties.
That's right. So. That's right. G'day, Johnny, Beck. How you guys going? 4, 5 or 6 months later, these particular awesome clients of ours, they've hung in there, and just recently this week, they've settled on 3 properties all at once. So
the 4th one's coming through.
The 4th one's coming. So shout out to you guys. Awesome stuff. And did I have grey hair prior to working with Mate?
Not as much.
Not as much, but no, I did. So finance is a big one, but I have to say, I think people's mindset has to be ready to go as well. You have to be in the right frame of mind to take on properties, take on contracts, take on all these different decision-making processes that you have to go through buying a property. So the mindset has to be right. From there, I feel like everything else flows. So,
and good thing that you mentioned there, like about finance, like because I know for myself, like if I had more finance, I'd have more property. I'd add an extra 0 to my portfolio. Right? If you had more finance, you'd be more portfolio. Like if all of our investors, I think if everyone here tonight that's watching asked themselves, if you had more money, would you buy more property? And the answer would be yes. So finance is probably the biggest part of it. People sort of often overlook that. They're too focused on a deal or too focused on the small little things that play into the property journey.
Always remember, just be nice to the brokers. It's kind of like, don't shoot the messenger, because the brokers are often working overtime. We've even got brokers still in the office working on deals now. So the brokers are your friend. That's all I can say.
And maybe if we could share like a couple of scenarios, like you've got that one investor. I've got a couple of notes here. Like the one guy, we don't want to mention any names here. The person that started with 40 grand. And,
I was actually looking back on this particular guy's profile just before coming in. I thought he started with 40 grand and we got him 2 properties. He actually started with 30. He started with 30 grand. And again, his mindset was ready to go. He made the internal decision to, investment properties, this is what I want to do. And so came in from map session, came on board, great guy, awesome client. We bought him 2 properties.
For 35 grand starting price.
That was his deposits, yeah. I think one was 60 grand and the other was 85. Yeah. So 60 grand and 85 grand for 2 properties. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
rental income, that's the better one.
Rental income is, I think it's about 250. I don't know exactly.
One's 200.
Oh, okay,
one's 200 and one's 380. So it's like 580.
Yeah. After expenses, I think he's sitting at about 300 or something.
Yes.
So, but the cool thing about the cheapest property that he bought, the 60 grand property, he said yes to the property. The rental at the time was, I think, 280 or something.
Yeah.
And by the time he had settled, so from accepting to settlement, the rent had gone up like 150 bucks.
Yeah.
So that was really awesome. Anyway, so fast forward to now, he's settled those properties. We just recently did a revaluation, and it's come back, and he's had about 45k to release.
The 85k one revalued at 135.
135.
And the bank was being a dick to start off with, right? It's
Yep.
difficult. We talk about finance, that the bank was being a bit difficult. We got the property settled, and here we are, maybe 3 months later or so, pulling out the equity with 45k. Then, we can use that 45k. Yeah, but
Let's go again.
Did you send me an email about that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, send me an email.
Stuff is live.
It's live. Things always happen. So how things work. Some people have asked questions about how things work. We'll run through that this evening. So if you've got any questions, just feel free to put in the message box. I'll come back and answer your questions throughout this evening. But how things work, Pat and the other investor relation managers are here to sort of help with communication and holding your hand for sorts of things that you need to navigate throughout building a large portfolio. I do all the purchasing myself, locating the deals, negotiating the deals, and presenting the portfolios. So these guys will work very closely with all of my investors, are very intimate with their portfolio. So that's why I said to Pat, send me the email, because with that extra 45, we'll go buy the next 1 or 2 properties for his portfolio. So that's how it happens. Talk us through the next person that wants to buy their dream house.
So this is a kind of a hot topic of conversation with anyone that comes to us. They want to know about investing, but in the back of their mind, they also want to buy their primary place of residence. And it's a fair question. What do I do first? So this particular investor, he came to us with that intention. I want to buy my PPOR in a certain catchment area in Sydney so that he could send his kids to the school that he wanted to send them to. So started with about 120 grand. That was his starting cash position. And that deposit wouldn't get, because Sydney prices have kind of gone through the roof for residentials, wouldn't get him the house that would, he'd want for his family. So he came to us. Long story short, instead of investing in a PPOR that would actually cost him money, he deployed his deposits. I think his first purchase round was 2 or 3.
It's 3, I think. It's 2 or 3, yeah.
So 2 or 3 purchases to start with. We revisited those, pulled the equity out of all them, and now he's just settled on his 6th property now, and that's all within about 6 months or so.
He's positive cash flow, I think, about maybe 25 grand a year at the moment. And the good thing about that is now if this investor goes out to buy the principal place and buys a place, let's call it $1 million, $1 million loan at 2.5% interest rate would be 25 grand a year. So these properties would technically pay for his living expenses to live in a house. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is we can pull all the equity out from it and then use that to buy the principal place of residence.
So the way I see it is, if we're buying a primary place first, that's going to chew up capital, and it's also going to chew up expenditure for you as well, which will affect your servicing. So going in and deploying deposits and hard-earned savings into an investment property, you're getting a return. It's obvious. You're getting a return on these things, but we're able to go back in and harvest the equity and redeploy it into a home.
And I remember we talked about the other day that, if someone has $1 million loan on a house, that means that they're having to get up every day and go to work and pay for that mortgage, right? Which is every day when I drive to the office and I see all these people's houses and I'm like looking at these blocks and they're like 300 square meters, 250 square meters, I've got no backyard. Jared Hayne probably has more daylight hours of the day right now. Probably poor joke, but more of a yard space than people that have got $1 million mortgage. If you don't get out of bed and go to work to pay for the $1 million mortgage, then something's going to go wrong. But if you had the same $1 million and you would have bought 5, 6 properties like this investor did, now you've got a half dozen people that are getting up every day, going to work and paying you the income, and then you're using that to pay for the mortgages, and then you're ultimately earning the assets that are underneath it. If something goes wrong and those tenant doesn't, perform and doesn't pay the rent or doesn't get up to go to work, you remove the tenant, put a new tenant in, and you still got the other 4 or 5 tenants that are there paying you rent every week and paying your mortgage. So it's important to sort of structure, I guess, the lifestyle that you want to live and the desire. So instead of having to pay for the house, you might live in, make your tenants pay for it.
I think there's also, I suppose, a bit of a, again, back to mindset, kind of a risk factor of going into investment properties and things like that. That's what I find is a bit of, it seems the debate, I'd rather buy a primary place because I just know that it's there and I pay my mortgage and I do my thing and that's all fine and it's all safe. I feel like that's erring away from the risk factor that comes with an investment property. But I also think that's just down to not enough education around it also.
Yeah, of course. Of course. And if someone's got $1 million property that they're buying, and then that's all they can buy, like I say, they get a loan of 800, someone goes out to buy a property for 800-900 grand, they have their income, let's say they're on 80 grand a year, then their income is set at 80 grand and then they pay for this 800 grand mortgage. If you've got 800 grand worth of investment properties and you go buy 5 properties that are 150, 200 grand a piece, you've now got 5 rental incomes coming through at $300 a week. $300 a week times 5 is $1,500 a week. $1,500 a week times 52 weeks in the year, you've now got an extra 78 grand a year. If you're on 80 grand, now you've got an income that you've got to go to work for 80 grand, and you've got an income of 80 grand coming from rentals. You've now got 160 grand income, where the person that bought the house they're going to live in has now got the 80 grand income on the books for 800 grand of debt. So it's how you plan it, which is really important.
Yeah, that's right. One more. So yeah, another gentleman that came to us probably toward the end of last year. He came, spoke to Nathan, spoke to myself. He had an external broker, or I think he was going straight to the bank.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to do one property, which I completely support. If someone wants to come to us and just do one property, I think that's great. I think that's probably more than most do anyway.
Yeah.
But this guy came to us, one property. He had one property down, and then saw how easy the process was. He wanted to go again, and I think the second time he went two at once, or
you did 2, and then I think this time he did 3.
Yeah, so it was. He started with 1. Essentially, is I suppose the cool part of the story, and that's all he wanted to do. Fast forward 7-8 months, he's just about to sell his 5th property. So just a cool story. This particular guy, I love working with him. He's so easygoing and lovely person to do the whole process with. But he sees the value. I think that's the important thing. If you don't see the value in something, then don't go with it.
But I think it also takes it back, Pat, to their goals too. Like people have clarity on their vision, and it's gonna, be easier to take moves. Like people that don't have a clear vision, it's a bit hard for them to
for sure
take action as well.
For sure. So yeah, so they're just a few of my clients that are active at the moment and doing some really awesome things. It's only 3 examples amongst many, but yeah. If anyone's keen, do reach out and start a conversation.
Everybody loves you. There's lots of love here for you. That's nice to put a face to the reassuring voice. Some questions here for you. We'll run through some of the questions.
I see a few familiar names there, so g'day everyone.
And there's a few cool stories that people have got as well, like just looking at some of the names here. Chris asked a question. I'll be answering that shortly for you, Chris, but I've also got something for you regarding what you've been texting me about recently. So I might actually have a solution to one of your things that you're trying to work on. So I'll text you a little bit later. Text me and I'll text you back a little bit after this. So yeah, maybe we'll just answer maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll get Matt onto the hot seat and ask him some questions. So there was a question here from Janelle. Would love to know where those properties were. Smiley face. Have a chat with Pat. Call the office 1300 367 925, or send us an email, and yeah, Pat can have a chat to you about that. Or if you've already got an investor relation manager, have a chat with them about those sort of deals. Stephen, with inflation coming by refinancing, aren't we just obtaining a large debt with a smaller purchasing power? How do we tell the right time to stop refinancing and start debt reduction? It's a good question. At the moment, like, if we're looking at this, is a really good question, and I'm just trying to think, because I've got a fair few things about this in the slide deck for this evening, so I will be covering that off. But in essence, the benefit of having equity is that you can take debt out today and pay it off with tomorrow's devalued currency. So 100 grand worth of debt in the early 2000s would have been very big debt, and people would have been scared by that. But the debt today in 2021 is not really much. Like 100 grand's a deposit or your stamp duty on a property if you're buying in Sydney. So looking at paying down that debt, there will be a point where I want to see debt reduction, but it's not at the moment. Like, we're picking up properties that are, I always talk about the 3 things from investing: buy below market value, have a strong upside for capital growth, and have a positive, neutral positive cash flow. There's a 4th one that I'm very considering adding into the mix, because it's what I'm very, very big on, especially as of probably the last 24 months. And we're talking about that in the mentoring program like 3 or 4 years ago, Steve, is that when I'm buying assets, I want to buy it below the infrastructure cost. So if we're looking at a property that we're buying for 150 grand, you couldn't build a house for 150 grand. So if you're buying it below the rebuild cost, everything's gone up, from transport to the raw materials to commodity prices. Everything's being inflated. So if you're buying it below, it's just another level of solidity to protect yourself there. So yeah, I've got no issue with taking out more debt in order to, because cheap money at 2, 3, 4%. I will get into it a little bit later on. So keep on question there. Can you please talk us through the actual process and what you need to do to pull out the equity from a property from start to finish, and what you need to do, what you need the broker or the bank to do? I will cover off that probably in about the next 20 minutes, Scott. I'll bring Matt on right now, and I'll have a chat with the rest of the team, and I'll come back to that question. So thanks a lot for that, Pat.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Shake hands for the Lord today, but
that's it. Good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the session.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Pat. Cheers. Matt, could I get you to bring the water as well? Just getting a little bit parched, everyone. Thanks, Matt. Pull up the hot seat.
Right.
You nervous? Your first webinar?
Hey. Yeah.
So, slide over to Matt's one. So we've got Matt here, and maybe if you want to give everyone a bit of a background, like on your background, where you've come from, a bit about yourself and why you came here.
Yeah. So yeah, I moved here from the UK about 9 years ago.
Yeah.
I've been working in construction my whole life.
Yeah.
In the UK here as well.
Yeah.
Done a bit of everything in terms of the building game. Worked with some good builders. Done my bricklaying qualifications. Worked in civil construction. Did a lot of like cable laying.
Yeah.
Gone through many different aspects of the building game. But for the last couple of years, just been seriously considering getting over into the corporate world.
So this is your first office job?
Yeah, first ever office job.
How
Yeah.
Yeah, someone said the video's not working. I think the video's working for everyone. Yeah, with it, that's funny. It's like your first office job. It's like Pat's second office job.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, well, for the last couple of years, I've been sort of weighing it up, trying to figure out what's the best move for me, trying to use my building sort of skills to an advantage of some sort. So at first I was looking at construction recruitment. I've got a lot of friends that do it, stuff like that. I can use the skills, obviously, and it would help develop, on the client-based kind of side of things, Had a few interviews, didn't really get much luck. Come across a job offer at B.Invested. I think I did well in the interview. Well, I got the job anyway, so I obviously did something right. And I've loved it since, because one thing I sort of see as well is the skills that we're developing here, which is why I wanted to change careers, is to learn, develop new skills, and work way up a different kind of career ladder than I've been used to my whole life. But here, we're learning skills that you're developing for the future, that are good for everyone's future, but I'm also getting paid for it as well. So I see it as it's a bonus,
Yeah. I've got a lot of good feedback from the people that you look after, and the way that you nurture them and whatnot, and that's really, really important. And why as a part of recruitment that we select to want to work with you as well. So, and as for like stories like inside the office, like we've had a lot of team members over the years. Like I had, wouldn't call her a PA, but she was like my office admin sort of chick. She came in she was like 17, and I think she got like 6 properties now, and she's off working in the government at the moment. There were some staff that have got like 20 properties. It's like, your colleagues have properties, and they're doing their own portfolios as well. But it's something that as you grow and learn and get to experience things with the investors as well.
Yeah.
So, and so in your time here, like so since you've been here, like maybe you like think about the top 3 things that you've learned or changed, like from listening to investors and seeing their mindsets and stuff.
Yeah, well, I've definitely learned a lot. All sort of different parts of it, because I mean, there's so many different moving parts. You realise that there is a hell of a lot to it, and you can realise why a lot of people do become stuck when it comes to investing. Just even touching on paperwork, contracts, the legal side of things. There's a lot of legal documents, that sort of thing. There's a hell of a lot of work to do, and you can see why it's very stressful. I mean, you see it day in, day out, but I guess that's what we're here for as well, is to take away that stress and make it more of a smoother experience, and the whole team here are obviously very good at that. They're all very tuned into Nathan's style, Nathan's strategy, but also very good at what they do. But yeah, I've learned a lot personally from all different parts, from how much, like Pat touched on, how much the brokers actually do, and how much stress they're under. So again, you've got to be nice to your brokers.
Yeah.
But yeah, sort of seeing it firsthand, I've learned a lot about the ins and outs of properties. Obviously, cash flow sheets, all the different attributes that are attached to properties, which a lot of people maybe, they might have a bit of an idea about investing, but when you really get into it, you realise that there's so many attributes to a property that might suit someone, but might not suit someone else in terms of their property portfolio and where they're at in it. So I've learned a lot to do with, the aesthetics of property, like the attributes, and then certainly all the processes behind investing from a client's view and from us here and what we do, and just the sheer scale of what actually goes into investing and building a good portfolio.
And one of your new investors that were just before the webinar started, like we're a little bit late, as we normally are. There's always lots of things going on. And from your side, one of your investors just bought 3 properties straight away.
Yeah,
so it's gone from 0 to 3.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
and they don't think it's achievable, but make things happen and make people see how easy it is.
That investor, I spoke to him I think about a week ago actually, and when I spoke to this person, they were wanting to build a granny flat. They had one property, they wanted to put a granny flat in the backyard, and when we were talking, I was like, the cost of a granny flat, to build a granny flat, you're just overcapitalising on the one property, right? And it's spending 150 grand, the properties hasn't gone up in value. You've just spent a lot more money on it, and you could actually buy a whole new asset, and that was something that, like, shit, that's bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
cool. And any other things that you want to chat about today, or?
Yeah, so just I suppose, like when we talk about clients, there is, everyone's in a different position. There's different scenarios, different points in their life, different financial statuses. But we tell all our clients that there is something for everyone out there. You start low, or you aim high. Start off with a few little investments. Some people want to go in guns blazing, and we welcome all of it, because, like I say, there is something for everyone. Nathan's got a very large pipeline of properties come through, and as well, some people can be very nervous and very sort of skeptical, and that's what we're here for, is to get them to see that we stress for you. We take that stress away from you, so you don't have to. And some are what we like to call yes people. So the yes people are the ones that will actually succeed so much. It's because they just believe in the process. They understand that we're here to do the legwork. Nathan, let's face it, you want advice about property investing, you come to Nathan. So it's just believing in the process, believing in what we do. It gives you that peace of mind moving forward, so you don't try and stress too much. Allow us handle things.
Like it's important. Like, one thing that I've learned over the years of building the business and having properties in the portfolio and whatnot, is you're only as good as the people that are around you. And from my side, always, I'm humbled that you want to come and work as a part of the business, because it's like my vision and the dream and the team and whatnot, and for you to want to be here is humbling from my side, to play into that, into the vision. And you could go and work anywhere, like you could be off in any office doing anything, and for you to be involved in the vision. Like, the business, the community is only successful as the people that our community has. And from my side, look at my portfolio. Like, if I didn't have good brokers and good accountants, good lawyers and good builders and all different stuff over the years, I wouldn't be able to get to where I am. Putting these slide decks together, like, every week, like every time we do a webinar, the slide deck basically gets uploaded as the webinars go live, right? It's always changed. I want to have it right. But if it wasn't for having great people, we'd be able to do that. And I think our investors, have the confidence in us because we have great people in the business to help them. So,
Absolutely.
Cool. Any other?
No, just so just the main story is when we talk about me getting the job, I was just sat at home because I'd actually had a bad accident. I had a bike accident. I was in hospital. I was out of work for quite some time. And I thought, well, now is the time to actually change careers. I've got a lot of spare time to find some job vacancies, and that's where I came across B.Invested.
Cool. Awesome. I've seen lots of good stories from people like your clients and from the team that love working with you, and I think that the results that you're delivering for the investors is like as a business, we've got, like, I don't know how many staff we employ. Like, we've got national, we've got people everywhere. We've got like over 100 staff. Like, some people call up sometimes, they're like, I don't know who this guy is. He's calling from like Townsville. He's like, do we have a business up in Townsville or wherever? But I was going to say, actually, the mind blank.
I don't know the amount of people that we work with, and people that work for you.
Yeah, the amount of people that we've seen, I don't know what I was going to say now. Yeah, so the amount of people in our team, like as I said, like teams only includes people who are around us, and that extends out to the community because everyone, that we help out, they're employing us to help them, and it's important that we've got a good team internally. And over the years, like we've got over 100 staff on payroll at the moment, and it's growing constantly. But over the years, like we've had lots of people come and go throughout the business over the last 12 years, and some people pick it up very well. Some people aren't a good fit; they leave very quickly. And seeing, through the short time that you've been here, how you've picked everything up and your commitment and your passion and whatnot is really good. Like things that you're doing way before anyone else, that your colleagues have been doing. So it's really good to see that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think it makes it easier when, I mean, some jobs, obviously everyone can relate to it, sometimes your job sucks, doesn't it, and everyone wants to go to work every day, but some days, well, everyone has them kind of days. Surely everyone has them days, but, a lot of days here, you look, like I say, going back to what we said before, we're learning things that are really good for the future, anyone's future in terms of, wanting a bit more freedom with time and obviously making money and having, assets that make, give you free your time up,
Yeah.
So when you're learning them sort of things and you're at work, it's exciting, because you want to absorb more information each day. So.
And I guess like when you first came on and you get to see everyone else as well, like seeing our investors, Gemma's going to be up shortly, and I'm going to talk about one of her investors that came on in December. He's up to like 26 properties in the last 6 months. It's crazy. And you wouldn't get to see those sort of things. Like there's no one
People don't think it happens.
Yeah.
People don't think it's actually possible unless you're some bloody millionaire. Or some rich guy.
Yeah. And it's just building towards that. Like habits habits and mindsets really important, because if you have a bad eating habit or a bad health habit, bad coughing habit, with it, your habits will reflect your result. And if people have got good habits and good, things that they're doing, they're going to get better results as well. So
it's all about structure as well, isn't it? You've got to have not necessarily have the whole thing planned out from start to finish, but you've got to have a plan, and again, like we say to our clients, it's all about, being committed, but at the same time, there's got to be a bit of trust both ways. We've got to trust you, you've got to trust us. But having a bit of a plan in place, I mean, I guess that's, what we're here for as well, and what Nathan's very good at is creating a strategy for each client and a plan. That's the most important thing, is having a bit of strategy, and just committing to it and relying on the process.
I've got a question here, and this is from the person that bought the 3 properties. So when accumulating properties, if you hit a wall with finance but have equity, would it be better to start buying more properties with a higher deposit equity, or keep waiting until you can finance and keep the equity for deposits? Everybody's position is different. Sometimes people come to us and they've got lots of equity. Sometimes they've got lots of cash flow but no equity. And that's the importance of working through. That's like what we were talking about last week, is making sure that we're making the right moves to appease the bank's needs. So, for example, the guy that Pat was talking about that had the 35 grand, we boosted his cash flow by buying those 2 little cheapies that were like 60 grand and 85 grand. So it was like real cheap, it was like 150 grand, got 2 properties. But the gross weekly income that was coming in was like almost 600 bucks a week. That boosted up his cash flow. The banks would lend him more money because they've got more income coming through. He can now pull out equity and then get himself back on the right track. So every time one of my investors can't service, always, I'm not a broker, but I'll understand what will be holding you back. I'll speak with my finance team and say, hey, most people just get told you can't get finance, you can't get a loan, you're screwed, and they just take it and they don't do anything with their life. I always want to know why. Why can't I have this? I just keep asking the question. It's like, well, why can't I service? Well, you need more income. Well, how much income do I need to service? So someone might be servicing short. I was talking to someone earlier on, maybe about an hour before came online, that is short about 10 grand a year to service. So, you know, if someone can pull out 100 grand and they've got that as cash, and they're going to go buy a property for 80 grand, the rent's for 300 bucks a week. They buy that property, 300 bucks a week, that's 15 grand a year. Now that extra income could help service and get it back on track, so go pull more equity out. So it's really important to work out where you're at on your journey and what you need for the next steps to overcome that. So I'll make sure that you don't get stuck. I can't control the banks, but I can do what we can to make sure that we get best mileage for your position. So,
yeah, awesome.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you, mate.
No worries.
We'll catch up soon.
Yeah, great. See you guys.
Cheers. And now we have Gemma. So Gemma has a funny story. You know exactly what
Do
I'm
we
about.
have to rehash it every
Yes.
single time?
Yes.
Get a new story, bro.
So you got to move on the screen. This is Gemma, and when Gemma's first day, Matt was saying, you know, sometimes you don't think it's possible, you don't believe it or whatever. What happened, Gemma? I was drawing on the whiteboard.
Don't let me tell the story that you brought up.
There's a whiteboard right on the wall there, and I was drawing what you know, what we do and explaining everything to Gemma, and she goes, look, I've heard stuff before in my life, and I'm just saying, I'm calling bullshit. This is bullshit. Was that?
You'd said you bought a property for 50k, and
50,
I
it was like 16 grand. It was like 16. I know the one.
you're only feeding into my side of the story there.
Okay,
but yeah, that's fine.
But yeah.
Yeah, and that's not at the time realistic, and I laughed out loud when I shouldn't have laughed out loud. But yeah, I said I didn't want to call my new boss a liar, but I do think you're full of shit.
One of your investors actually, it's on the email, so I don't know if you've checked it yet. She said yes to a property I found today for $16,100 for a block of land.
Yes.
Yes, you saw that? Is this your part? Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, cool. So there you go. She just had one of her investors buy a property for $16,100. So yeah, I'll leave it to you, John. So
What do I know?
I'll just tell me, like, you know, there's people saying here, we love Gemma already in here. So like, you've
Yes.
got lots of fans.
And I love you. I love all of my clients. There's some, yeah, I have a little fan club going.
She has what? There you go,
There we
Steve.
go.
There we go. There's another one. Look, it's yeah, it's good. One thing I do know is that Gemma will be straight onto it. Like, I know if I send something to you, Gemma will, I don't have to worry about it, right? And that's one of the things that's really important. I go, okay, if I delegate something, it's done.
Mhm.
And there's something that your clients, that you'll go and fight for them, you'll go make sure shit happens, you'll, you know. And I always say to people, I used to say it actually a lot, but I don't say it nowadays because I just know I've got a great team. But like I used to say, like, we'll be like your PA throughout the process, because there's lots of moving parts of building a portfolio. And it doesn't matter, you know, Linda said the other day, she goes, one of the things that she remembers very vividly is that we had this big party one day. It wasn't a party, but it was like cake, it was like birthday cake.
Yeah.
And cake fell on the ground, and I picked the cake up, and I know in her mind she was like, fuck, if Nathan can do this, like anyone can do it, but we can change it, we can do whatever. And it doesn't matter who we are in the business, like we're all, you know, the PA for everybody, so we're all here to serve and help everyone, you know, achieve their goals. So I know that that's why everyone loves you.
Well, I have said that yes, you're great. You're all right at what you do, but I do think like the investor relations. You're right. I've said like I said to the clients, I'm your PA within the business. So what you need and what the client needs, we're kind of like.
No, we're the client's PA. Like,
what I'm saying is I'm better than you.
Oh, okay, that's great.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just what I mean is like your office is a glass box. So I do let the clients like you're not always available for everybody, and I think if you're not available, of course you need a backup. And yeah, I just think I'm better than you, really.
That's fine. I'll take whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
So tell us, Gemma, like, what was your journey before here? I know your journey, like, tell me.
Geez, I think I'm one of those people. I think they call them gypsies.
Gypsy,
Do you have gyppos out here?
Yeah, gypsy, like they float around, they
Yes.
like move around.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always like to try something new. So I've been, you know, I've worked in bars, I've been a dog walker, you know, working at doggy daycare, and that was more of a passion thing rather than making any money. But yeah, so I'm massively into traveling, which is obviously not happening anymore. But yeah, hobbies, I suppose. She really prepared for that question.
You love dogs.
I love dogs.
She loves dogs
Yeah.
and animals. Yeah.
I actually had a chat with someone today for about 30 minutes on company time, just about his puppy. He just got a puppy.
Really?
I'm taking him to puppy school, and I know everything about the dog, less about him.
Okay.
But yeah, but no, yeah. Anyway, yeah, massive into charities. I used to co-run a charity over in South Africa. We help in the townships teaching kids.
I didn't know that.
You've never listened to it?
Yeah, probably not.
But no, so we actually we try and teach them English to get them out of the township. Without going into too much detail, it's crucial they don't get taught in English. So I teach them dance. So it's quite easy, left and right, and it's a real quick way to teach them English.
Okay.
But yeah, I just really like helping people.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like, what are some of the things that you've learned since being here?
Jesus.
Right.
It's just going to be like word vomit. I came here very much.
You knew fuck all about property, like you really knew
just
nothing.
Life in general.
Yeah.
I remember our financial advisor gave me the death stare when I mentioned I'd been traveling the world for like 18 months and I didn't have a scrap of travel insurance, no car insurance, no health insurance, just kind of winging it. I remember the day you kind of burst my bubble of life and made me cry just because I realized how much I didn't have my shit together.
That's all right.
At all.
I actually remember that. It was like, yeah, I remember that.
I drove home crying that day.
That's all right.
Well, it was.
It's all right now.
Yeah.
Like growing isn't easy. Like you have growing pains.
Yeah.
Like in life, you know, you go to achieve something. It's not easy to grow.
Oh, no, it really wasn't.
Yeah. One thing I do know is that you didn't know anything about property. Like you really knew nothing, and that was great because I didn't want people to come in and tell everyone, oh, this is what you should do with property. I wanted people that are going to take care of our investors. And over the course of the last year, you bought your first property as well.
Yes.
Tell us about how you bought your first property.
Terrifying.
I want you to tell everybody about how that went down.
So this property was a three bedroom house in Queensland I think it started at 170, but I think we got 160 in the end.
Yeah.
One of my investors had said no, which was, looking back with everything in hindsight, is absurd.
Yeah.
And literally just went fine.
Yeah, so it was like, I got the shit, so I thought, when we're doing a deal, like, I know that we're making 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever we're doing with the deal, whatever the deal brings to the table. This investor was like, oh yeah, nah, look, I've gone and done my research. It's like, well, why do you need me for it? You're going to go do your own research, like go do your own deals. So I was like, fuck this. And I sent the guy a text message and I said, hey, just letting you know, I'm taking the deal off you and Gemma's going to buy it. And then Gemma called the client and said, hey, just wondering why you don't want to buy the property. And he said to you, aren't you buying the property? And you're like, am I? And
not a clue, not a notion in the world that what was
happening. I said, sign the contract. And we got Joel. And Joel goes, really? Have I signed the contract? Am I giving it to you? I said, Gemma, give Joel your details.
My passport was coming out, my driver's license was coming out, everything was going. Yeah, didn't have a, yeah.
But you said you wanted to buy a property, right? And you'd like to get into the market. Well, then you did, and you freaked out.
Yeah.
And it was great. Like, I loved it.
It was
right?
really good.
I was so happy because I was like, great, now you know what everyone else is doing. You say, hey, buy a property. It's like, what the fuck? Like, I bought a property today, I'm buying 5. You said, oh, it's a bit different because they're coming on board as a client. It's like, well,
they did have a little bit more warning. They get an email, they get a cash flow sheet, they get, you know, why this fits you. Obviously, I trust you 100%. So I did just close my eyes and do it, which in a lot of sense, the client's doing that as well. And it was really, really good. That I think that gave me an extra kind of insight that if someone wants to call me at 8 o'clock at night, freaking look out, call me because I get it. I think there was one client, I actually drove home. She was freaking out about something. I put on the phone for an hour and a half, just driving home on my commute. And it was good because now I've learned, now I've taught her that if anything you've got in question,
Yeah.
ask it. Do not sit on that information,
Yeah.
because you'll end up driving home crying like I did.
See?
Yeah. No, it was good. But anyway, yeah. So I think, did you know it got the rent increased?
What was the rent on it?
230.
Yeah.
Now 300.
300. Okay, cool.
300. Yeah.
So $70 a week extra.
Mm-hmm.
If
No,
the
I
old owner, hey,
I went and got my head.
did you?
I was like, right, let's go. And the
Every-
best thing was the tenants weren't paying the rent.
Yeah.
So of course I closed my eyes, signed all these documents and whatever, find out the tenants aren't even paying rent. But that's actually the best thing that happened. I want all of my tenants not to be paying rent when I take it over, because I get all of the rent.
Oh, great.
I inherited debt, so I get the payout. So I 100% went to shop.
Oh, that's great.
It's
That's
really
great.
good.
That's great. But that shows that the agent didn't do their job, the lawyer didn't do their job.
Mm-hmm.
So you clean up the I didn't even know, but that's great. How far behind were
About $2,000.
they? There you go. Now I know what
$2,000,
you're doing.
Yeah, which
So-
I got my hair done, got my nails done. Don't do that. Please don't go and spend any income on stuff you don't need.
It's part of enjoying it, right? It's part of the journey. So
And I think it should reval for about 320
320, yeah.
ish.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I bought it, so it's going to revalue for double. And that's what I love, right? Like, so I actually had one of Pat's investors that maybe watching this, maybe not talking to us anymore, right? But you remember what happened that day when I lost it? I lose it occasionally, right? Like, lots of things go wrong. I don't lose it too bad. But there was an investor and they said, oh, no, they went to sign a contract on Christmas Eve and it was Australia Day and I realised they hadn't signed a contract. I said, they're not buying the property now, I'll buy it. And then he's like, no, I want to buy it. I was like, no, I'm going to prove a point to you. And I took the property off him and I bought it. I did that twice this year. And one was for you as well. So that's 3 times what I can think of just hearing the conversation, where we buy the same things that our investors do.
Yeah.
This guy could have said yes, could have took the deal. You bought it for 160, you revalued it to 320, you just doubled your money. It's not even doubling your money, it's like tripling, because you put down 40K, you refinance for 300, 320, you pull out all the equity, like that's a lot more than what you started off with. You know, people oversee this sort of thing. And,
Yeah, I did make that call of like,
Yeah.
a little bit of smug,
yeah,
a little bit of smug. But just more like the education side. If you
Yeah.
don't know what you're saying no to. That's the thing, people don't know what they're saying no to. But yeah,
if you don't know, you don't
a
know.
lot.
So things that you learn, what are probably like the top 3 things about investors and the psyche of investors that you've learned over the last
I have investors that are from all different, the dreams and goals are all different shapes and sizes. I have clients that do one every 3 months. We'll make sure everything is pinpoint perfect. I have people living life on the edge, and somehow it works. And I shake my head on a daily basis of how this got through. But yeah, I have people that have started with less than 20K, and I think it was in 6 months was able to buy 2.
Yeah.
I pull in the equity, and then I've got clients that, as Matt said, become yes men and trust the process. They close their eyes, they do it, and I think you've already delivered my punchline. But bought 20.
Well, they just said here, there's like these. I won't read out the name, but it's
Oh,
like you're doing
pay
a
rise. They have mentioned
pay
a
rise.
pay rise.
Give Gemma a pay rise. Don't be a
Don't
tight
be a
ass.
tight ass. There is a charity
seriously,
fundraiser I'm doing.
Big thanks from Gemma. I gave you some charity
Oh,
for
but
the
there's
last.
another one.
Well, tell me about it, and I'll help you out, right? But you've got like those that investor. You've got one. I don't know if you've got notes of it, but there was one the other day that said no to the property down Southwest Sydney. Wanted a copy of the last webinar, and he's up to 5. Sold his car.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. The different mindsets. You've got people that will be very, very cautious, and he actually was. And it kind of ties in that it's always the property that people say no to, and they did the same. That they said no, and they actually called that property. Oh, I should have really. And we had a laugh about it, because the things that they were worried about, I was like, you were stressed about something so small. There was something in the room on the building and pest report. It looked like there was bricks in there, but there wasn't.
Yeah.
It was like an incense burner.
Yeah.
So I called them back, like, that's not a brick. It's I don't know why we were talking about it.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, the one that just with the 4, he did the same thing. It's like that one property that freaked me out.
Yeah.
And he absolutely refused to.
Until he did a revaluation on it. He did a revaluation on it and he didn't buy it and he asked for it. 17K was it? How much was the purchase? It was like 280, 290, something like that?
I think, was it like 180?
No, it was in Sydney. It was
Yeah.
It was like 280. I think it was like 280.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
280 and 17K out. Like
It was a
250.
difference of 70K, I remember that much. But yeah, but the same thing. And they actually asked for anything that's like that again, please send.
And he sold his car.
Sold his car. He's actually sold his motorbike.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, so his bike first, then his motorbike. Now, then he bought a car. Now he's about to sell it again for a profit. So I feel like when the switch goes on and everyone goes all in, then you see the magic happen.
I rocked up. I don't drink alcohol or that. Like occasionally I do. But I was like maybe like 21 or something before I had the first drink, and I had a bit of a hangover one day. I went to an auction and I wanted this property. I just walked out and bought it, and I was like, shit, I don't have a deposit for this thing, right? Like I've got like 10 grand. I need another 20 or something.
That's the
like
living life on the edge bit I was talking about, yeah.
And then I sold my car and I bought a $250 ute, drove it for about a month, and then I bought another one. It was like I had a brand new car. It was like a Subaru Impreza, brand new one. So yeah.
But no, I think the main thing when we talk about mindset is even the people that are doing the very, very best. So like I think 24 in 4 months, and then now it's like 26 in 6 months. And even people like that are so confident and going for it, there was times when I had to give them a little bit of a slap down, like, let's relax, let's think about it logically. And
sometimes it's going, no, don't do anymore.
Yes.
And sometimes it's like you got to push, and sometimes we're going to hold it back, like, no, don't do anymore, because you're going to hurt yourself. So yeah.
That was paperwork. I felt bad. I did feel bad at one point, because I know when I did mine, all this paper that came through, there was pages and pages of it for one, and this poor guy's doing 24, and I'm like, I couldn't even imagine. But it's just being available.
Yeah.
It's being available, and it's fine. Just keep going. It'll be worth it. Maybe ask, was it worth it? Oh.
It wasn't worth it. Like, you guys know who you are. They said to give Gemma a pay rise. Was it worth going through all the paperwork? I remember, Jerry, I don't want to go into the name, but yeah, absolutely. So.
And it's funny, it's coming from the missus, and I remember the very, very first conversation I ever had with them was, I've got to convince her. I have to, just give me some time. I have to just convince her. She's going to freak out. Didn't hear a peep from her. It was a little bit shaky on his feet. But in the end, the best part of that was literally they bought an income.
I just got a message here from Steve, and he wrote, man, the paperwork is easy. Working for an employer for 50 years is the hard part. So it's mindset. It's mindset. Yeah, and Josh just wrote here, I'm still getting my head around the contracts and can't wait to do it again. About to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So, any other?
No, my little notes here, because I have a terrible memory. Yeah, look, we have lots of different types of people. I don't know, look, all of this is quite fluffy. I don't think I can really follow or say anything that the other guys didn't say. For me, it's the relationships that I build. When they're like, tell me, what's some cool client stories, all of them are cool.
Yeah. Depends where they're coming from, like whether it's the first one. I was talking to one of your investors the other day, and this guy said that he came here on a visa, and then, I don't think you're aware of this, this guy came here on a visa, and then his boss didn't pay him properly, and then he said, I'll promise you I'll look after you with building you a house, and he worked for him for almost free, and the boss went bankrupt, and he took off, and he got no money, but he said, I used to eat from the bin. One of our investors.
Oh, I love this guy. He's such a sweetheart. I know who he is. Yeah.
He said he ate. I've never had any investors said he ate from the bin before, right? And that's like, it's a hustle.
Yeah,
it's a hustle. It's a hustle. So everyone's got different stories. So he's doing all right in life. He's doing good. And it's We're all starting from different, starting points. Some people come in and they've got a couple of $1 million and they do nothing with it. They've got like, heaps of income. They might have $1 million income and $5 million in the bank, and they do nothing with it. And they, you've got investors that like that. They do like one every now and then, and you've got someone that's got 50 or 80 grand income, and they've got 30 grand saved up, and they go and buy 5 in 6 months. So,
yeah, there's very wide spectrum of different people, and it's when the switch, the people you're speaking to tomorrow, they're very much, I love them too, because it was very, very nervous, didn't really understand it, and then when the switch flicked, they were like, right, okay, we understand it. And that was the person I was on the phone for an hour and a half, just chin-wagging about
the dog.
crap. No, it wasn't even, there was nothing of substance there. We did 10 minutes on property, and then it was, But I don't know, I think for the mindsets, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be hard parts. There's going to be, the way I attribute it is we fight the bank. We have to go up against the bank. We have to go up against.
We're trying to rob the bank. That's what we're trying to do. Like, this is one of the biggest things, right? Is that people want to go into the bank and say, give me all your money, right? Fucking, this is a robbery, like on Pulp Fiction, right? Put the stocking over their head and they try and rob the bank. The bank wants to give you money, right? Which the whole topic of discussion of tonight is about equity and being able to pull equity out. You want the bank to keep giving you the money, and there's building the strategy that's going to get the bank. So how can you impress the bank? What do you need to give the bank in order to get them to give you the money? It's not a gun in their face going, oh, give me your money. It's like, it's like, okay, you want income from me. Here's the income. You want a deposit. Here's the deposit. And then getting them to give you a
question then, I know this is not a Q&A thing, it's meant to be us giving information. If that's the case, why does something make it so hard to get it?
What do you mean?
So if they want to get you, they want to give you money because
they need to protect their ass. So the banks are very difficult, but they do want to give you money. That's their whole business. They get paid when they lend money out. Just think about it. The bank lends money out. They want to get income from it. The more they lend out, the more income they got. They want to give you more money. But people don't look at it like that.
Yeah.
It's just simple. It's like, okay, well, what do we need to deliver? We deliver a strategy for our investors, and then that strategy involves them being able to keep you in the bank with money to buy more assets. The more assets you got, the more wealth you're going to create.
So it's all for sure, the being all these hard, we have to make you jump through hoops to get money.
Oh no, they're a pain in the ass. Like they need to protect their money. Like they need the money up, it gets burnt. Like they want to get it back. So the barriers of getting into the bank is a hurdle. But you've got people out there that are like, think about it, like people buy $1 million houses and they're like got incomes that can't support that. Like they need to do their checks. They've got processes and systems and procedures. And how we're going, that we're trying to, most people will be able to get a $500,000 to $1 million loan for their house to live in, and that's what the bank is designed for. We're trying to break the bank and get them to give us $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, and we've got to get them to accept our system. But we know the triggers that's going to get the bank to give us all the money. It's like smashing open a poker machine and getting all the coins flying out. That's what we want to do with the bank. Yeah.
But yeah, to sum up with the IR team, the way I like to think of it is we go up against the banks. You have to go up against some agents, for example, that whenever there's issues, we're only there to do what's right by you. Some information that we get, it's like, okay, all hands on deck. I don't know what's happening here. I had one seller that, God love them, we weren't hearing back from the exchange. Has it exchanged? Has it not? What's going on? No one knows. It turns out that he was in a coma.
Yes, I know that one.
And I was like, what do I do with that information? And
I actually went into the open home. It was a property in Cairns. I went into the open home.
Yeah.
I know the agent. Agent's great. We went in there to buy the property, and then it was a deceased estate, and it got handed to two sisters. And then the two sisters were the executor of the estate. So we had an offer and acceptance. Everything was fine. One sister signed the contract. The other one had a heart attack or something, went into a coma, had like an aneurysm, and was in a coma for like a month. And we couldn't get the contract signed.
So
What did you come up against?
But yes, but we're in the middle with the client. I think that's the best way to describe it. Is you're going to have people trying to stop you succeeding, and I don't know what the theory is called. There's something where you try and step out of the enslavement or whatever, and there's always something to push you back down.
Oh, every level there's a new devil.
Yeah,
there's always
so
the devil trying to get you.
each time, like the universe, when you try and step out and try and succeed, the universe is going to slap you about, see if you can if you can handle it.
Yeah.
So we kind of see like that. Everyone's going to start slapping you around to stop you getting this, but we're in the middle to try and do everything we can.
Just a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I've always, yeah. So then we kind of can roll between several thorns that are flying on fire.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy, but we make it look easy.
Awesome.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Gemma. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for sharing. And I'm going to go into the rest of the presentation tonight. So, talk about equity. Thanks, Gemma.
Bye, guys.
Keep being awesome. To answer your question, Scott, there's two Scotts just asked me a question. The question I'm going to answer right now is, hi Nathan, do we wait for you and the team to tell us when to pull out equity, or do we initiate you and the team when we think we're ready? I'm constantly working on how to pull out more equity. Just moving this over so I can be close to the keyboard and everything. I quite often go to my investors and say, hey guys, you know, just so you know, you can buy another property. I've already spoken to the finance team. We've been able to pull out equity in some circumstances like that. But also, I think it's important that, you know, both myself working with the finance team, as well as you guys work with the finance team to be proactive. So every 3 months, we're looking at what equity we can get out. Awesome. So if you can, you know, you guys just settled your property, you know, you go back, ask Singer to pull out some equity, and then, you know, go again. I speak to them as well. I was actually going to send you something a little bit later, but I wanted to wait until you settle your final one, which I think there's a bit of a hurdle on at the moment. So getting back to the slide deck, thanks a lot for hanging in there. We've got a little bit over time as always, but what is equity, you know, and how does it work? I know a lot of you guys will look at it and that you might say, well, I know what equity is. It's the money that's in my home that I can pull out to use in order to buy something else or to purchase something else. However, yeah, and it's important to have a strategy behind it. You know, if you understand what your sort of game plan is in relation to, building the portfolio, you'll understand, you know, you have more clarity about when to pull the equity out, how to pull the equity out, and being able to get that equity out. So, in short, put a few little notes in the back of my screen. Equity is the value in the home, the difference between the current value and what it's worth. So if you have a property you bought for $500,000 and now it's worth $800,000, you've got an extra $300,000 in equity in the property. You could go back to the bank, ask the bank to push the loan up. Say if you're working with an 80% lend on your property, you would get 80% of that $300,000 out, which might be $240,000. And with that $240,000, you've got it sitting in your bank account that you can then go and purchase and acquire other assets with. You can generally use your equity to buy property, or, you know, a lot of people out there, most people, when they pull equity out, they're using it as an ATM, their house as an ATM, so they can go and buy a new car, buy the, you know, the family something, put an extension on the house, a holiday, whatever. But, you know, I only touch equity if it's going to be used for, you know, another asset to acquire. So the best part, and this is what I sort of work with my investors, people say to me, Nathan, how come you're buying properties at $150,000, $250,000, $350,000 purchase price? Why don't you go buy $1 million property? Because the system doesn't work, right? McDonald's works well because it's got a cheap, fast system where they pump out heaps of hamburgers, and that's how they aim to build their process and become profitable. As an investor, you want to work out a system that's going to work for you, and that's the first thing I said based on equity, is having a game plan. But if you're getting 50 grand equity out of your property, if you have a property that's worth 200 grand and you pull out 50 grand, you're pulling out 20% of the equity. If you've got $1 million property and you pull out 50 grand, you're only pulling out 5% worth of the equity. So yeah, looking at the current position is like the more percentage-wise of the equity, the quicker you can snowball the effect. So if you were to go out and purchase a property for $200,000, I don't have any slides to show it on here, but if you had a property of 200 grand that you purchased and it's worth 250,000, the purchase would be that you buy the property for 200, you put down a 20% deposit being $40,000, so 40 grand, and then the bank would give you 160k loan. So 40 and 160 to 200, that's how your deal would go to the bank and what they require from you. If you were to go back 3 months later, revalue the property from 200 to 250,000, you've now got $50,000 worth of equity in it. The bank will give you 80% of that that money. So 50 grand, 80% of that would be $40,000. That $40,000 would then go into a side account that you can use as a drawdown. You can use that as an next deposit. So in essence, you've bought a property for 200, put 40k deposit in, 160k loan, revalue it, you get 80% of the 50k, which is 40k. You will end up with a 160k loan and a 40k loan, basically getting all of the equity back so you can redeploy that into the next deposit. So a mindset like Pat and Matt and Gemma just mentioned to us, people's mindsets grow, and that's probably the coolest thing seeing over the years is that, good point there, Lisa. The mindset's very, very important. When I first started investing, I was taught that debt is bad and you want to pay off all the money and all this sort of stuff, because I was being told things from other people like my mum and my brothers and my siblings and family and colleagues and whoever was in my ear at the time. So looking back, I remember this is probably the best example of how I can explain it, right? I could sit here today and say, hey, my name's Nathan. I bought my first house in 2003. I spent 7 years paying it off. I got to 2010. I bought another property. I spent the next 5 years paying it off. It's 2015. I bought another property, spent another 5 years paying it off. I could be sitting here saying to you, I've got 3 properties that I bought for whatever I paid for them, and I've paid them all off, right? Which 3 properties paid off, so it's okay. But the problem is that the first property I bought for 200, it went to 500. The second property I bought for 400, now it's worth 800, and the third one I bought for 800, and that's worth $1.2 million. I've had to work very hard to pay off those properties, and I'm earning money. I'm paying 30% tax on that money that I'm earning from job or income or whatever, and then I'm paying off the debt to save myself 2% interest. The thing I left out of the equation when I first started was inflation. Inflation is the key, because if you have a good debt strategy, you work out that inflation, you can take today's debt and pay it off with tomorrow's dollars. So I could have bought 10 properties at 200,000 back in 2003, and now they're worth 800,000 a piece. I could sell off 3 of the properties and pay out all the debt. It's a matter of having a strategy based on that. So I could have, worked very hard, paid off my debt, end up with 3 properties, but that ain't the game. Like, who wants to pay out the debt, especially when it's only 2 or 3% worth of interest? It's better to keep the properties. And I'll tell you a funny story about a news article that I did on TV. It was a live article once on Channel 7, which I walked off stage and I was like, you guys are fucked. It was an interview with Koshi and his friends. So I'll go on to that shortly. Let's get a bit of water first. The question I have is, what is there around what is equities? You need to ask yourself, if you had to save up 250 grand as deposits for a property, whether you bought 1 property or 5 properties, how long would it take to save up $250,000? If you could buy that property that I was using as an example, if you bought the property, most people don't even realize that they're sitting on equity. Inside your home, if you bought a home 5 years ago for 500 grand and now it's worth 800 grand, you've got 300 grand in equity, you get 80% of that of 240, you could literally go and refinance your mortgage, pull out the equity, and have deposits for 5 properties. If you had to save 240, 250, that could take you 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Like an average person saves, 20 grand a year. It'll take 10 years to save that up. Whereas you could use your asset that you currently have, go back, pull out equity, and use that equity to go and purchase subsequent property. So for me, I didn't know at the start what equity was. I didn't understand the ramification. I didn't understand the benefits of equity. But when I realised what equity was, I was like, shit, this is the key to what's going to be my strategy. And a lot of people never find that out. A lot of people still think paying off debt is very good and all that sort of stuff. And they won't be rich. They won't be wealthy. They will, be savers or losers today, because if you had $1,000 in the bank account last year, you can't buy what that same $1,000 did last year again in the future, because the cost of everything has gone up and the purchasing value has disappeared. So it's important to understand how the currency works and how debt works in that. The benefit of, like looking at equity, some people sit here and say, pulling out equity is bad, it means I've got debt. When you realise that all money that we use, the dollars that we trade in, is debt, you realise that the whole game is rigged. It's not just what you get to play with that's left over, it's how every part of the financial system works. All money is debt, right? So any money that's in existence is debt. It's not even in existence, it's fake, it's all debt. So once you realise that the money that we use is debt doesn't become that bad. It becomes a very, very powerful tool. I don't know many people that, if we look at people, we look at businesses, we look at nations, the most successful ones of them have the power of leverage, and that's all that equity is leveraging one form of asset and using it to pull over another asset, and it's just leverage. And that's, if you can understand how that works, you could sit here with one property and go and work real hard and save and pay a loan. That one property that gives you $100 a week in your pocket, or you could have 10 properties that give you $100 a week in your pocket. And that gives you, instead of having $100 a week, you've got 10 times $100 a week. You've now got $1,000 a week coming in your pocket, but you've also got a larger asset base. I will get into the power of the asset base very, very shortly. So, John just wrote a message here. How old is too old to start investing in property if you have $1 million in equity? The banks will lend up to people about 60, 65. So as long as you're younger than about 65, after 65, they've got a responsible service of lending sort of barriers to come into effect. So if you're below 60 and you've got $1 million in equity and you've got servicing and you've got a job and all those boxes that tick for the bank to be happy to lend you the money, then it's not too late to do so. Pros to pulling out equity. I'm going to run through a few little pointers as to why I think it's important to utilise equity. So if you were to pull out 50 grand, if you had to go save 50 grand, just run a few sums, get a budget. Everyone should run a budget. Every business operates with profit and loss statements, and as a household, I think everybody should have their own sort of budget for the household. So you've got best use of the cash flow coming into your household, and you're keeping a lot of it so you can look after yourself. Steve in the comment section made a very good point beforehand about paperwork. Paperwork might seem difficult, however, working 50 years in a job is difficult. So being able to budget and making a couple of sacrifices early on in your life, it may sound like a lot of sacrifice and commitment and all that sort of stuff, but sacrificing your whole life, that is a whole different commitment. That was like the scariest thing I could ever think of. It's like, if I'm going to live, die and not being able to live life on my terms, it's not going to be a nice thing. So if you have a budget, ask yourself, how long, if I need to buy one property, if I just need to buy one property today, and one property will not get you retired, I'll run through that a little bit later. But one property is not going to get you retirement. But just assume we're going to buy one property, and that one property is 200 grand, and you need 50 grand to buy that property. How long would it take you to save $50,000 in your current position? If someone's on 50 grand a year, they've got to pay taxes and eat and food and shelter and all that sort of stuff. It might take 5 years at saving 10 grand a year. If someone's on 100 grand a year, they might be able to save 20 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand, 60 grand a year. But how long would it take you to save 50 grand? If you could pull that out as equity and pay, let's say you pull out $50,000 and you've got an interest rate of 3%, that would mean that you've got 3% annual cost to service that money. 3% of 50 grand is $1,500 a year or $30 per week. So people say, isn't it risky to pull out 50 grand of equity to use as a deposit? If you had to go and earn that 50 grand, you'd have to pay 30% tax on that and lose a good chunk of it because you'd be getting screwed from the government having to pay the tax. So it's important to look at the power of that leverage because you're not paying tax when you pull out the equity. You're just pulling it out and then you have to pay a percentage of interest on it. However, if you were to take out $50,000 worth of equity and go and buy a property for say 200 grand and it gives you $50 a week positive equity, positive cash flow, that would mean that you're using that 50 grand, you're paying $30 a week for that privilege of doing so. You're buying a new asset that's improving your asset position, net worth position, but also your cash flow position is being improved because you've got $50 a week passive income coming through. You pay out $30 a week, you've still got $20 a week in pocket. So it's important to understand the power of leverage and the pros of being able to do so. There's no tax payable on it. The interest is very, very low. If interest rates were 10%, it would be a different story. But when you've got a tax rate at 30% or 40%, and you've got an interest rate at 1%, 2%, or 3%, it's much more advantageous. When you sprinkle on top of that the power of inflation, the cost of everything is going up. Timber's gone up 6 times in the last year. The cost of copper has gone up double. The cost of steel has gone up double. The cost of everything is increasing more and more. So your money is buying you less and less. So if you had $1,000 in 2021, it's buying you a hell of a lot less than what $1,000 back in 2015 would have. Your buying power is being removed. If you understand that inflation works in that way, you would realize that on the flip side of that, that if money or currency is losing its value, then the opposite of that is that debt is losing its value. So the value of that debt, if you've got 100 grand worth of debt, 100 grand worth of debt 20 years ago was a lot of money. 100 grand worth of debt today is very little. The debt level doesn't change, but the asset value gets inflated away and the cost of your asset base increases. So I actually made a video series on this yesterday. I did just a 10-minute video on it. It'll be coming out over the next couple of weeks. And in short, I was just basically saying that I made 20 million over the last 6 months for doing nothing, right? People go, how'd you make $20 million? Well, my portfolio of properties has gone up. It didn't go up because I was a great investor. It didn't go up because I had to do hard work. It didn't go up for any other reason apart from inflation and how that inflation has worked towards my favor, from having the asset base. So having the assets that will be inflated is very important. If we look at other importances for having expansion of monetary into your system, if your household is a budget, your property portfolio is a budget, and it is a system, the more liquidity injected into your system, the more cash or capital that you have to deploy into more assets for expansion. So all successful businesses out there have levels of debt. All nations have levels of debt. All successful investors have debt. All the corporations, the Woolworths and all that, they're looking for an injection of liquidity in their system. If we look at our currency, the reason why we're seeing a big property boom and the price of everything going up, Lisa just commented here and said steel has gone up 40% since January. So 6 months, the cost of, so Lisa has a concrete business and she knows the cost of materials. So if you want to lay a driveway, a pool or whatever construction, the slab for a house, the steel that goes inside the concrete is now gone up by 40% just in the last 6 months. What pressure is that going to put onto the property market? What pressure is that going to put onto the cost of everything? So, the expansion of liquidity out there in the market, it wasn't by chance that your house has gone up in value, your Big Mac meal's gone up in value, your car's gone up in value. Why do cars go up in value? Why do second-hand cups go up in value, right? Everything's going up in value because it's not the value of the items getting better, it's the fact that it's not because you can't make enough cups, it's the cost, it's the fact that there's a lot of liquidity being injected in that system. So there's a thing called trickle-down economics. I'm going to be like, ooh, trickle-down economics. And if we can see money flow through the system, that is where the big thing is. Fred just posted here, international shipping has doubled as well. The cost of goods to arrive here in Australia has doubled, right? The cost of everything's been inflated away. So if you can take debt and have anything, right, whether it be a Big Mac, right? If you could buy a Big Mac in 2015 for $6, $7, whatever, and sell it today for $12, like you were taking something through. You could buy double the amount of burgers, sell it now. But the problem with the burger is that it is a perishable good, and the value of it is diminishing because you've got to eat it, and it'll be rotted by now. The Big Mac might still be the same because who knows what ingredients are in there. It's a different topic. Looking at the cool thing about property is that you've got an asset which is getting inflated in value, so it's going up in value. But not only just the asset that's going up in value, you've also got the cash flow that's going up in value as well. So you could take today's debt and pay it off with tomorrow's dollar. I'll give you a story about my mum and dad. I grew up in Parramatta in Sydney. Someone in Australia, I wonder how much my second-hand shipping container is worth now. Let me tell you, I've got lots of shipping containers all nationally around the country. Like I've got them sitting in sites and they move around. I've got logistics there. A shipping container, like a 20-foot shipping container, you could have bought for about $1,900 last year. They're about $4,000 to buy a shipping container now for a B or a C grade shipping container. So the cost of everything's going up. My parents bought a house and land package going back 52 years ago in Parramatta, Sydney. So for those of you that are familiar with Sydney, those of you that aren't, Parramatta is like the new CBD of Sydney. It's like got heaps of infrastructure around it and whatnot. They paid $13,000 for this house and land package 52 years ago. My dad was on about $2,000 per year, and this was in the imperial system, pounds, pence, pennies, that sort of market, not into the dollars and cents market that we're in now. But my father was on about $2,000 a year. He was an NRMA patrolman, a motor mechanic. You'd call it RACQ, RACV, wherever you're based, a mobile mechanic basically. I'd assume if he was alive today, his income would be about $80,000 a year, but it was $2,000 52 years ago. He was able to buy a house for $13,000 at the time. Interest rates were quite high, but not weird. They were about 9-10% from all the research that I've done. If my dad worked his whole life to pay off this mortgage. By the time, I think it was about 1991, he paid out the mortgage. And I remember being at the bank, I think it was like Advance Bank or some bank around at the time. And he's like, we're paying off the mortgage today. And he went in there, paid his last $500 or whatever. The loan's gone. The thing is that if he never paid off that loan, if he had a $13,000 loan 52 years ago, and he went to pay that loan off today, the world is a different place, right? The property value is worth around $1.2 million now. If they were to, like my mum still lives in the property, if she was to sell the property today for $1.2 million, the incoming buyer would have to pay stamp duty of like $30,000-$40,000. So the state taxes would be 3 or 4 times the price that my parents would have paid for the property as a brand new property. If they had a loan of $13,000, they could have had 6 months worth of rent now, would have paid out that whole mortgage. So that's what I mean when debt becomes relevant with inflation. You can pay it off in tomorrow's currency after your asset gets inflated, your cash flow gets inflated. So that's a pro to using equity as a leverage. Instead of having to sell your time and sell your energy to go and earn some money that's going to lose its value anyway, get slugged with the taxes, get ripped off on the way, you could just go and pull some of that money out of your asset and then go and use that to create more assets. One little disclaimer I forgot to mention today is that I am not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice. I'm just giving random stories about random things and try to help educate and open your eyes to different sort of strategies. So looking at another pro to pulling out equity, if you had to wait 4 years, say 3 years, let's say 3 years, and you had to work hard, save up for a deposit, and this is something that really hurt me, is that I couldn't sign a contract till 2003. That's when I turned 18. So I bought my first property in 2003. But if I'd have bought a property in 2001, which I think I could have because I was working really hard as a kid, saved up a deposit, the property, every time I'd save up 10 grand, the property market would go up 20, 30, 40, 50K. So the property market's rising at a far greater pace, and it's happened since, when they changed the money supply back in the 1970s. So since the 70s, the market keeps rising. By the time you save 10 grand, 30 grand, 50 grand, the property value's gone up by double, triple, quadruple what you've been able to save. So by having access to equity, if you could get 50 grand now and buy a property, you might pick it up for 200 grand. But if you have to wait 4 years, save up 50 grand, by the time you do so, the property may have gone from $200,000 to $300,000 already, and you've lost that profit that you could have gained and been in the market earlier. So if you could, with the example beforehand, if you had a $500,000 property, it's gone to $800,000, you've got $300,000 in profit. There, if you sell it, you could take that $300,000, 80% of that would be $240,000 you could pull out as deposits and use that to buy 4 or 5 properties. You would have 5 new properties, let's call it hooks in the ocean, to be able to catch more fish by having more hooks in the ocean by using the equity. So it's being smarter and more aggressive with your accumulation of assets. So the other benefit is that if you could use, as I said, you could buy the properties quicker, buy them sooner. But if you're buying properties that might have some form of tax deductions attached to them, I don't buy properties for tax deductions, but if you're buying a property that's worth $250 and you pick it up for $200, you're making $50K on the way in. If it's giving you $50 a week in your pocket, you're increasing your cash flow position, so you've got more money flowing through every week. If you're buying a property that's modern with a bit of depreciation attached to it, you could be saving 3, 4, 5 grand worth of tax every year. So if you're on 100 grand income and you're paying 30 grand in tax, and you can buy these properties that have got depreciation attached to them, you could lower your taxable income from 100 grand a year down to 50 grand a year. Instead of paying 30 grand in tax, you might be paying 5, 6, 7, 8 grand worth of tax. So being able to access more tax deductions along the way as well. The infinite return, I should have an actual whole slide on this, but I don't because there's so many things I want to talk about this evening. The infinite rate of return, if you were to be able to pull out $50,000 worth of equity from your property, you could then go and purchase another said property using that money as a deposit. If you were to then get that property that you bought, like a babushka doll, and then pull out equity from that property, let's call it 30, 40, 50K, you could use that to buy your third property. And that's how our investors have been able to, stories that we've been able to talk about this evening, how investors are able to go and purchase large property portfolios very quickly. It's not by fate or by chance or by luck that people get to 10 properties in 2 years or 12 months or 3 years. It takes a lot of strategy, it takes a lot of skill, it takes leverage. Is there risk attached to that? Sure, there's risk attached to that, but there also is risk attached to having money saved in the bank. People say, oh, getting debt is a risk. I'll tell you what's a bigger risk. Working like a fucking dog, right? And then saving 100 grand or 50 grand. And then with that money that you saved, you go to buy something with it, and then you've lost all your purchasing power, right? And people think so badly about debt. I think so badly about money. Cash is trash. It's absolute trash. So it's very, very important to look at that. The poorest people around the country, doesn't matter if you're looking at Australia, doesn't matter if you're looking in America, another third world country, whether you're looking in China, India, England, New Zealand, doesn't matter which country, which continent you live on in the world, the wealthy people, they have something. they have assets. The poor people don't have assets. Assets buy you options. Having the ability to leverage equity gives you more options to acquire more assets. So, I believe wealth is not monetary. I absolutely hate monetary. Wealth can be determined in any different denomination. It can be time wealth, it could be health wealth, it could be lifestyle wealth, it could be family wealth, it could be all different formats. If you were to talk about richness or what society would deem as real wealth, like that perspective, assets is a wealth. It's not pieces of plastic with dead criminals on. Because if you go to the bank and try and ask them to give you your money back, they'll treat you like a criminal to get access to your own money. So the other aspect to look at is, selling off a property. So a lot of people, I've never heard people come to me, just think about this throughout all your friends, your family, could be yourself, could be whatever. Think about it. Do you know anybody that's come to you and said, I am so glad I sold my property 20 years ago, right? No one comes in. I've never heard anyone come in my office and say, Nathan, I just want to say I'm so happy I sold my property 20 years ago. I've got a question here. Someone asked, Ash asked, are we able to get a copy of the recording? Yes. Speak to my team. If you're watching this already, it'll probably be automatically emailed to you. But if you don't have access to it, email the team, admin@binvested.com.au, and they will send you a copy of the recording tomorrow or whenever you need it. So, so I've never heard people come to me and say, hey, Nathan, I am so happy I sold a property. They're normally upset that they sold a property and generally saying, I wish I hadn't bought more assets. So if you have a property, let's say you bought it for 200,000 and now it's worth 400,000. If you sell that property and you make 200 grand, great, right? You're selling the property, you're making 200 grand, no problem taking a profit. But what is that 200 grand going to buy you? It's not going to buy you all that much because the value of the money is losing its value. Once you sell that asset, the government is going to come along and they're going to tax you for capital gains tax. They're going to try and extort you to pay them more money. You're going to have no asset left. The asset will not be going up in value. The new owner of that asset will be generating the future growth. You have killed off any potential chance of cash flow from that property, and you've also limited your asset base. So it's important. Jono said he put his hands up. Didn't understand inflation as well at the time. It's important to understand how it all works. So but looking at when you're pulling out equity, if you're pulling out equity, you don't have to pay tax on that. You have to pay interest on it. If you've got an interest rate of 2 or 3% and you're paying tax at 30%, that means that if you sell off the asset, you're losing the asset, you don't have any future growth, you don't have any future cash flow coming from the property, and it's the end of the story. If you keep the asset and you pull out the equity from the asset, it means that you've got the money in your pocket right now. Yes, you have to pay 2 or 3%, but if you had to pay 2% for the next 15 years, that'll be 30%. That'll be like the tax that you pay. If you were to pull that equity, could you get a better return from reinvesting that into more assets? So that's why my strategy is about continuously purchasing more assets. When I get access to money, I'm trying to get rid of it as soon as possible and buy more assets which are generating more cash flow. If I didn't have to work for money, I could use my equity to go and purchase more assets. So that's really important part about it. Like, you can either go work 30 years to try and save some money, or you could go and pull out equity and use that for deposits. Moving on to the next slide, I can see a lot of questions coming through. I'm going to read all your questions at the end of this, so if you do have questions, keep them coming through. And I'll get on the next slide. So what are the risks involved with equity? So the biggest one, people say, I need to repay the debt. But in the example that I said beforehand with my mother, if they were to sell the house, the 13 grand debt is irrelevant now. Like 13 grand is nothing when the asset's now worth $1.2 million. So, a lot of people are looking at the risk of, I've got to pay off this debt, 50 grand. 50 grand sounds like a lot of money to anybody still. But 50 grand, 10 years ago, a BL Commodore was $200 on the side of the road. Now, an old Commodore is now worth 10, 15, 20 grand. I'm not a car guy, but I know they've gone up a lot. Get myself a bit of water. The debt is becoming irrelevant because of inflation. So that's something to remember when you're thinking about that you've got to repay the debt and it being a risk. The biggest one that I see as a risk is if you bought a gut of an asset or bought something very volatile. You could go into negative equity if you're in a volatile market, but that's mainly if you borrow over and stretch yourself to a very silly point. For all of my purchases, I go in with a 20% deposit minimum. For all of our investors, we've written billions of dollars worth of loans for our investors via my finance company. I've got a finance company called Zinger Finance, so if you need help with financing, I can help you out with that. But we've written billions of dollars worth of loans, and I'd say probably less than 1% would be over that 80%, like whether it's 90% or 95%. If you're pushing yourself to the extreme, it also hurts and limits your growth and the ability to pull out more equity. But if you push it all the way up and the market does come back a little bit and you've got the wrong asset, then there is a bit of potential there that you can have negative equity, which is not good. I certainly see people on a regular basis that buy these properties. That generally the properties that I'm referring to are properties that are the sort of like glossy brochures, off the plan sort of stuff. I speak to people every day that have bought these properties and they bought them from some property spruiker. They've got a nice chart and some presentation and a suit and a tie, and they come across a bit different than I do. And they buy these things, they get paid a big commission from the developer. They might sell it for $500,000. The person buys it and the property goes down to $250,000. And they're like, I can't sell this thing until the market goes back up. They've got to wait 10 years. That is the problem with buying some crap properties. The other risks that I see is people pulling out equity to buy dumb shit, whether it be pulling out $100,000, blowing it on a car, pulling out $100,000, using for a holiday or a wedding. I'm not saying don't go get married or anything like that, but people go and spend, they pull the equity out of their property. They could have used it for a financial, sort of gain and to improve their lifestyle, but they're going to spend it for a party for one day. By spending the equity on just dumb shit. So make sure if you're getting your equity. Biggest one of 2021 is people pulling out their money from their equity and then buying crypto with it. So I love cryptocurrency. I'm a big fan of that, and that is not the topic of discussion today. But I do see people that say, I'm going to buy a Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin. Someone recently said they put out like 35, 40K, and they're like, we're buying a half a Bitcoin. I'm like, why are you buying a half a Bitcoin at the all-time high when you can use that as a deposit for a house? So just be careful when you're getting equity that you don't buy stupid shit with it. The cost of equity is a risk. So people often say to me, Nathan, if I'm going to pull $50,000 out of my property and use that as a deposit for the next one, then I've got to pay the interest on that $50,000. And that's why I like breaking it down, right? So if you're pulling 50 grand out using this deposit, you want to counteract all the risks. Whenever I see risk, I want to find how I can minimize that risk. So if you're pulling out 50 grand to use it for a wedding, you're never going to get a cash flow return on that. You pull out 50 grand and use it on a car, then you're never going to get a cash flow return on it. You pull out 50 grand worth of equity, that's going to cost you 3% interest rate will be 3% of 50 grand is $1,500 a year. $1,500 a year divided by 52 is about $30 a week. It's not that much to cost you if you're to save. If you save $30 a week for the next 100 years, you'd still be, trying to get to that sort of level. Looking at if you were to pull out that equity and it's to cost you $30 a week, if you were to go and purchase a new asset that gives you $50 a week or $100 a week, then that $100 a week extra income that you'd be obtaining would be paying off that debt that you've pulled out from equity. So you always want to have a way to retire that debt and to service that debt. If you're pulling equity out and not using it for some form of cash flow generating asset, don't pull your equity out and leave it there. It's probably better off and a smarter and wiser thing to do. How can you use your equity to build wealth. So I did touch on this briefly. One of the things I want to talk about here is if you were to earn $50,000, you'd be paying 30% in tax. So if you earn $50,000, you're really only going to get left with $35,000 in your pocket. And how long is it going to take you to get that in your pocket? You could use that equity out of your existing asset to go and extract that equity, have 50 grand in your account straight away, and then be able to go and purchase another property straight away. So with most of my investors, I'll run through a few examples of this shortly, but looking at pulling out equity, like I've got investors and I've done webinars specifically on this. So if you do have a question about how to build a property portfolio using equity, I've already covered it in previous webinars. Speak to my team and they'll be able to give you that with the breakdown of how they've been able to go on. But as I said, like Gemma had an investor that's watching this evening who got to 24 or 26 properties so far this year, but that wasn't all from equity. I do have some investors that are watching here that have gone to 10 properties in like sort of 12 months or 8 properties in 12 months. Being able to, if you were to buy 10 properties in a year and the average deposit is $50,000, you can't physically save that unless you're, even if you're on $1 million a year. If you're on $1 million a year, you'd pay, I don't know, 400 grand in tax. You'd be left with 600 grand. You need to live off something. You'd need 10 deposits of 50 grand. You'd have to earn $1 million to be able to buy 10 properties a year. The way that the investor's been able to do it is being able to carefully select the right assets. That's where I come into, from finding the right properties and being able to help you, guide you along the way. But you need to be able to, pull the equity out of those assets and go again. So I've literally got some of my investors on autopilot where every 3 months they might buy 2 or 3 properties, they settle them, they come back, we revalue their properties, they've got some equity, they might pull out 50 grand, 100 grand, 150 grand, we go and pull that equity out, go and buy another 1 or 2 properties or 3 properties, and then we go and settle them, come back in another 3 months, revisit the portfolio and build out their portfolios like that. So yeah, with it, it's important to have a strategy around that. You can't physically save to buy your whole portfolio unless you've got, $10 million a year worth of income coming through, which is, go find a way to do that. And, there's lots of different things. But in short, the best way to leverage is to use the equity. So the other part of it as well is people say debt is bad, but once you realize how money works, you realize that money is bad, debt is just a tool, and the asset is what's important. You want to control assets going through market cycles. So if the market was to double today, which markets have gone up a lot over the last 12 months, if the properties go up, would you rather have $500,000 worth of property turned into $1 million, meaning that you've made $500,000, or would you rather have $5 million worth of property doubling to $10 million, where you've made $5 million? The later the better, obviously. So how long would it take you to build out from just saving, or if you could leverage equity and your current assets in your portfolio to be able to build yourself into a better position? So if the market did double, you'd have $5 million worth of asset doubling instead of 500,000 doubling. So it's important to have that from the scale of the portfolio, because you want to hold the biggest amount of assets to take through that next property market cycle. Some of the other things here. I talked about this extensively beforehand. If you were to have the 300 grand in equity, 80% of that being 240, you use that for the 5 deposits to buy the 5 properties. If those, yes, you've got the extra cost, right? So the cost base of pulling out that $240,000 would be 2 or 3% interest per annum. With that, you could, if you were to have 5 new properties in your portfolio that were returning $300 per week, then you would have another income stream of $1,500 a week, $1,500 a week for those 5 properties. Let's say that you purchased a property for 200 grand, rents for $300 per week, then you would have $300 a week worth of rental income from the new acquisition, times it by 5, because you'd be buying 5 of them. That would mean that you've got 5 times $300, which is $1,500 per week, $1,500 per week times 52 weeks is $78,000 per year. You've now improved your cash flow position, where if you're earning, 80 grand a year income, and then you've got 5 new properties, you've got the debt of $1 million, but you've now got a total income base of 80 grand plus 78 grand. You've got, let's call it 160 grand worth of income coming through to service that $1 million worth of debt. So I was recently in the car with one of my mates. He's an investor of mine. I've known him for maybe 12 years or so. He's got, I think, about a dozen properties. We're driving, we're going for a road trip. He was asking me a question about some stuff. I picked up the phone, called my staff. This is just my staff in my office on the Gold Coast. I was buying properties for my mate in the Gold Coast when everyone spat on the Gold Coast and said it was a shit market, it's never going to go up and all that sort of stuff. I was buying properties for like $150,000, $250,000. These things there, I said to him, look, your rents are too low, we need to push them up. I picked up the phone, spoke to my team, had a look at his portfolio, revisited all the rents on his properties that were in that portfolio. There were 6 of them. Out of those 6 properties, we were able to put them up between $80 and $110 per week. So, in short, my investor, his cash flow has gone up by about $600 a week just from tweaking his portfolio over that 6-month period. The markets don't always go up that crazy. If you just push your rent up $10 this year, $20 next year, $10 the year after, it's stacking that wealth. So your income is constantly increasing. So if you've got 10 properties in your portfolio that are going up by $20 per week, that's an extra $200 per week that you're getting because you've got 20 bucks times 10 is $200. $200 a week, 52 weeks a year is 10,400. You've now got a new income stream of that. If you do that for the next 5 years, you've got 50 grand a year. You do it for the next 10 years, you've got 100 grand a year coming through. So it's important to structure your portfolio correctly, but using equity is a very, very important tool, as well as having the cash flow. One of you guys had asked beforehand, how do you access your equity on a step-by-step basis? So there's a couple of parts to it. You need to make sure that you've got that you're going to be able to service. So as Gemma said beforehand, and Matt had touched on, and even Pat, building out a portfolio, there's lots of hurdles, right? And that's why I say it's like you're Neo in the Matrix. You're trying to get out of the Matrix, but there's always something that's going to stop you, hold you back, hurt you, whatnot. As an investor, you need to make sure that you're keeping the bank happy. So the bank will lend to you because you've got income to service debt and because you've got equity in your property to be able to pull out. So you want to make sure that you're buying assets that are going to give you enough cash flow. If you're buying properties that, are sort of negative cash flow, it's going to hurt your servicing and impact on a big scale. If you're buying properties that are neutral or positive cash flow, it's not going to really impact what the bank's going to lend to you moving forward. So keeping your servicing strong is very, very important to be able to access your equity. The other point is making sure you're buying properties that have got equity, whether it's from growth that's just happened naturally, or whether it's from buying a new asset that's below market value. So the reason why I say buying a property below market value is because we can go back and rip that equity out. The reason why I want to make sure it's got good upside for growth is so I can come back and either sell the property, retire the debt on that and some other ones, or that I can use that future growth as more equity, which is the real reason for buying property. And the third reason is to make sure there's good, strong cash flow. So if you don't have the cash flow coming through, you can't service the debt. So you want to speak to your broker and ask them what sort of equity do I have in my properties. Once you identify what equity you've got, you can revalue the properties. Your broker should be able to do that quite easily for you. That could come in the format of a full valuation, a desktop valuation, or a drive-by valuation. So it depends on your property. Generally, I'll look at a property, do a bit of research, and go, okay, it's probably best to do a desktop or to do a full valuation or a drive-by. You can't choose, but some banks are more steered towards different sort of valuation methods, as well as different lending based on your situation. So some banks might be better for self-employed, Some might be better if you've got a large portfolio. Some might be better for lending in a specific town or region. So it's important to have someone that understands the lending and which bank to take your deals to. Revalue the properties, structure the loans correctly. I see so many people, most brokers out there will try and fix your interest rates for 2 years, right? That's a very important reason as to why they're going to fix your loans for 2 years. If you take your loan away from that bank anytime in the first 2 years, the broker loses their commission and that just works for you for free. So make sure that your broker doesn't just go fix your loans for you and try and fix your loans, because if they do that, that could hurt you from refinance the property. The reason being is that if you fix your loan and the bank says, no, we're not going to give you the equity, they don't give you the valuation you want, or they just don't serve, you just don't service it anymore, you have to pay a break fee to take the property elsewhere, which will cost you lots and lots of money. So make sure the loans are structured correctly. And with the equity, you can get it as 2 different formats. So the equity could come as, there's actually 3 different formats. You want to try and get it just as a cash out. You can do it as a top-up loan. Top-up loan means that if you've got a property that you bought for 200, you've got a 160k loan on it, you put a 40 grand deposit in, you refinance it, you get 40 grand equity out, you'd end up with a 160k loan, and you can have a top-up loan, which is a secondary loan attached to the property, which would be for the $40,000. So the other way is that you could take the property, refinance it to a different bank, and get a whole new loan, which would be for the $200,000 amount. In some banks, which are really, really shit, they don't actually give you a cash out. They force you to buy another property and cross the properties together. I remember when I started building my portfolio, St. George trapped me by giving me this product called a portfolio loan, and the person that was selling the loans at the time, I didn't know, was crossing them all together, and they wouldn't give me any more than $10,000 as a cash out policy to me. So then I had to refinance my properties. That's when I met Rose, who heads up my team at Zinger Finance now. I met her 16 years ago or whatever, and she restructured my debt, and then I was able to go on, purchase more properties and continue my portfolio. So it's important to have, got a question here, cross the properties, is that cross collateralized? Yes, you don't want to have the properties where they're all attached to each other. You want to, each property needs to be a standalone loan to that property. So you don't want to have 2 properties attached to the same loan, otherwise that will trap you. It'll give the banks more security over you. It'll give you less options to move left and right, and it's very, very ugly. Out of billions of dollars worth of loans that we've written here, I have never had any of our loans for any of our investors cross-collateralized. It's just a big no-no. You do not want to happen to your portfolio. The importance of having a strong strategy in place. So, structuring of the finances is crucial, because if you don't have the money, you don't do the deal. As I said, I've said as a tongue-in-cheek when Gemma was here beforehand, people go to rob the bank and say, give me all the money, right? We want the banks to give us the money, but if you ask quite politely, they want to give you the money. They want to, they want your business. That's how they get paid. So understanding what the bank wants from you is important, because then you can tailor what the bank needs from you to give you the money with your strategy, having to meet, and you have a successful strategy. So most people go to the bank wanting to get the cheapest interest rate or whatever the case may be. I'm not interested about the interest rate on the loan. I want to make sure that the bank's going to give me the revaluation, the bank's going to be able to continue lending to me, that I can revalue in below 12 months. Some banks will say you can't refinance within 12 months. So you're screwed. You have to go and refinance to a whole other bank. I want to know if they've got a cash out policy where they will release that equity to you, or whether they'll say, no, you've got to do a $10,000 maximum sort of cash out policy. Having a strategy for yourself, having a business plan for your own portfolio is crucial. So many people do not have a game plan. They're just sitting there going, oh, I want to buy a property. I'm thinking of buying a house in my suburb or in Queensland or in Perth, whatever the case may be, but they don't have a solid plan. It's important to understand what your strategy is. If you want to earn $80,000 a year, that's great. Work backwards. What is that? That's 80 grand a year is $1,500 a week. You need to find properties that can give you $1,500 a week. You could work really hard, pay out all the loans and get there, but it's going to take you a million years, like I said beforehand. If I started in 2003, bought my first one, it took me 7 years to pay it off, bought the second one, takes me another 7 years to pay off, I'd be up to like my third property now trying to pay it off. At the same time, I could just bought 10 properties, utilize debt, utilize leverage, make sure that the cash flow is all in place. If those properties double from 200 to 400, that means 20 years. I just have to go through one property cycle, which have been two or three. I could have bought 10, watch it double from 200 grand to 400 grand, sell off 5, pay out the other 5 properties, have 5 properties unencumbered. But as you build a portfolio, you realize, why would I want to go and sell off the properties? It's taking me so much to go and purchase those properties. I just want to work on increasing the cash flow so I can get that income coming through. So one option could be that you buy 10, they double, you sell off half, pay out the other half, or you could just get the 10 properties and boost the income up, like my mate I was talking about beforehand that pushed his rents up by about $600 a week recently. They got him 30 grand a year extra income. If you just keep pushing your rents up across all of your properties, suddenly you're going to retain the assets, retain the debt, still have the large property portfolio which will keep growing in perpetuity, and yeah, be able to keep receiving the cash flow. So if I was to be Marty McFly, hop in the DeLorean and go back to 52 years ago when my parents bought their principal place of residence, you know, imagine if they bought 10 of those properties and they had 10 properties outright that were bringing in $20,000 a year. Actually, no, they're bringing in about $35,000, $40,000 a year worth of rent. If they were rent them out at like $700 a week, that'd be like $7 grand a week that they'd be earning as income, but they'd have a debt which they never paid off, which would have been 13,000 times 10, that's 130 grand. So if you've got 7 grand a week coming through, or 350 grand a year, it's easy to pay out that debt of 10 loans of 13,000. So it's important to have that strategy. It's going to work for you. Everybody's position is different. Everybody's risk rating is different. Everybody's goals and ambitions are different. And it's important to work out what you're comfortable with and what you're trying to do to marry up that right strategy. I do one-on-one consulting with my investors, where I do a thing called a map session, which is a strategy session. I actually don't like selling my time. I do these map sessions, which is just really to give help to the community, charge for it, because hurt money, because you've got to be committed for yourself. It's $495 for a map session. It will be going up shortly because I have never increased it from the day I started the business. Probably down to like $1,000 or something. But yeah, just if you want help building a strategy, feel free to reach out to my team, whether it's Pat or Matt or Gemma or Jeremy or Wayne. Have a chat with them and book in for a session. As for strategy, understand how you're going to build the portfolio. A lot of people go and buy a property, they flip it, they sell it. I was talking to a really cool new investor the other day, and he said that he bought all these properties and bought them, renovated, sold them, and he regrets it, but at the time it worked very well for him. If he had kept all those properties, would be far more greater off today. What's going to help build that portfolio now? So work out the strategy that's going to work for you. There's all different strategies out there. Sometimes it's a hybrid strategy of having some buy, reno, resell. Sometimes it's a matter of buying some foundation portfolio properties, like just bread and butter stuff. I'll share with you guys shortly some of the ones as examples. And then maybe adding some blocks of units on for extra cash flow at the later parts of the portfolio. Work out how many sort of properties you require. That's sort of what a map session is working out how many sort of properties you need in your portfolio in order to get yourself to your end goal, and working out a roadmap on how to get there. Finally, this is a really funny one, talking about the debt, just closing off on this part, and equity. I remember going on to Sunrise. I went on there quite a few times, and actually a lot of the management team from Channel 7 are my clients, and There's one guy there, Koshi, who's always a dig. Hope he's doing well. But he tried to always ridicule people. So I've got Linda in my office, who's sure to retire in the next 5 years. He laughed at it because she had like $2.5 or $3 million worth of debt or something on Channel 7, and publicly, nationally humiliated, saying, "Aren't you going to go bankrupt?" and all this sort of stuff. She's about to retire. She's going to sell one property and pay out a $3 million worth of debt, and she's going to live in, her dream house on the water. So she's going to have 20 properties. So there's this second time that I went that he tried this, right? And he left a note for a producer for the newsreader. It was this chick called Edwina Bartholomew, and she asked me this question. She goes, "Nathan, how much debt do you have?" And I said, "Oh, 20 million. And she goes, "How much are your properties worth or something?" I forget the exact sequence. It's online. You can see it on the YouTube channel. She said, "How much debt do you have?" And I said, $20 million. And at the time, I think my portfolio was worth around 50. And she goes, aren't you scared that the whole market's going to crash and that you're going to pay off this debt of $20 million? And I looked at her, and there was that Andrew O'Keefe guy as the co-host, and I looked at him, and I was like, "Yeah, but I've got $50 million worth of property. If I had to pay out the $20 million, I still got 30 mil." And I laughed. I looked at him, and it was like she didn't know what to do. She's like, "Oh, over to sport," right? It was funny. And as I got out the lounge, walked out the door, I thought to myself as I was walking off set, that's the funniest thing I ever said, because I was 30 years old at the time, and if I sold my portfolio, I'd never thought about it beforehand, but it was when she asked me the question. Koshi had literally put the question in there, and as I walked out, I was like, if I earned money from every day of my life since the day that I was born, I was 30 years old, my net worth was worth $30 million. If I sold off all my shit, I'd have $30 million. That would have been like me earning $1 million a year from the day that I was a baby to the day that I was on that TV show. $1 million per year net, right? You couldn't get a job that would pay you that, right? There's businesses, you could go into business, but are you going to get a business that's going to pay you $1 million net profit after all expenses into your bank account for 30 years, year after year? And it made me realize that the only way that I was able to get there is by leverage and building out an asset base. And I still have that same asset base. I've built on top of it. It's well over the centimillion sort of level, which is over $100 million now. And I wouldn't have been able to get there today. It's a bit slower for me to build because I don't use loans, because I don't fit the bank's model. I will be hopefully going back to a bank shortly in a commercial perspective and acquiring different sorts of commercial properties and different commercial assets, and the loans will be more of a commercial nature. But the bank system doesn't work, right? It's like a broken system. I can't borrow any more money from the bank. So yeah, it was kind of funny that, that I got asked this question, being a dick, whatever, asking me. But as I walked off the stage, I still remember very vividly. I was like, $30 million. Like, who are you asking me a stupid question? Get out of my face. And then I realized as I walked off the stage, just like $1 million a year, can't do it. No business, no job, all those sorts of things. How else are you going to get to that sort of level? And it's only through leverage and through properties and having a good asset and having good assets and having a good strategy to be able to get that. Because being able to go out and build a large asset base like that is not easy. So nothing in what life worthwhile ever is. Got to run through, I think there's maybe like a half dozen properties here which I've purchased for people, just to explain how equity has worked for them. This property here was a property in Queensland. We bought it. I think the guy might be watching tonight. Bought this thing for $155,000, valued it 3 months after sale, pulled out 115 grand. It's a bad deal, right? There's some really good equity there. This property here, which is in Queensland, I have this here. Here it is here. This investor is watching this evening. We purchased this property. It's a modern 3-bedroom townhouse for $285. Within 2 months, revalued the property for $365,000. The rent is wrong. The rent is $350 per week. Slide deck has an error in it, just for the team. But that thing there would now be worth. This was purchased maybe like 8 months ago. The person that purchased this is online as well right now. This would be worth 400,000 by now if you were to sell the property. So why would you want to sell it? You just go buy it, pull out the equity, use that equity to go buy another property. This investor, I forget their position when they first came. I think it was like had about 100 grand to start off with, maybe 110, something like that. I think they're up to about six or seven properties now in their portfolio, just recycling the debt and building out a really nice portfolio there. And I think it's time for that person to do the next deal. So I'll be talking to the team about some more equity for you. This property here, this one's a great one. This investor, I got to 8 properties in the last 12 months. I'm going to get to 10 properties by the end of this year. It's someone just said that person was a property investor. That's funny. This property here was a crucial part of this person's portfolio starting out. This investor actually started with $80,000 last year and has gone to 8 properties in their portfolio. Just think about that. You've got 80 grand, got into 8 properties in the portfolio. You wouldn't be able to save if you had a job to 8 deposits. So it all had to come from having a good acquisition strategy, good debt strategy, and remaining focused on the goals. So 130 grand, you need about 35 grand to get into the deal. Ended up 3 months later pulling out equity of 55,000. So very good purchase. This property here was one that we bought as a bulk deal. We bought the whole complex. Purchased this one. This was about last year, about this time last year, I think it was, that we bought here. This is Sydney city property, like in the city location. We paid 534,000 for the units here. Valuation 700,000 3 weeks after the sale. The equity here says 64,000, but I think that is very wrong. That's more than 64,000, but everyone got their deposit back and was able to purchase more assets. I think this investor that bought this property here used their equity from this property here in order to get to that one, which is pretty cool. This property here, 145,000 valued. I don't know what this one is. Oh yes, I know whose property this is. A little note here. 145,000, 255,000, 7 months after the purchase. Equity is 88,000. Rent is $260 per week. So these are sort of properties that you need in your portfolio. This one here, this one was purchased in the Central Coast region of Sydney. The purchase price was 260,000. Valuation of 342, pulled out 65 grand equity within 4 months of purchase. This client has now gone on to purchase another 2 properties, and we're in the process of pulling equity out to go again. So it's how you use equity to build a portfolio. For those of you that are watching this evening that are my current investors, these are only 4 investors that I work with. If you want to become a client and want to be able to get access to these sort of deals and be able to pull the equity out of them, speak to my team, 1300 367 925, or email us at admin@binvested.com.au. These are just some deals that I'm working on. This is a modern unit. There's been sales in this block, previous sales from a few years ago for $500,000. Recent revaluations of similar properties in the area that I've done for other investors have been around the 450 to 470. Rent is 400. So this one here has not got the greatest rental return on it. It's not a cash flow sort of deal. It is more of an equity play. But this is a blue chip property in Sydney. And yeah, there's another one in the block for sale at the moment, I think for 460. We've got this at 395,000. So if you need some equity, there's a deal there that's already got equity sitting in it. This property here in Queensland, 165,000. One of my investors is having to pull out of this property today. It is an off-market purchase. Don't get to see too much of it here. It's just a room. But 165,000. If you had $30,000 as a deposit, you could buy this thing. Revaluations in the area, similar properties are revaluing around the 220,000. Rent on it's 260, so you've got a good rental return there, good equity position. You get your deposit back to be able to go pretty well. This one here is a block of 3 villas that I just purchased off market. Purchase price was 360, previously sold for 600. Rent on it at the moment is, I think, 450, which is very low. In this market, these things used to sell for about $400,000 each. So this, at its peak, could have been anywhere up to about the $1 million mark for it. And rents for these used to be about $400 a week. In the current market, I think the rent's about $220 a week. So you're paying 360, getting 660 a week rent. Good little purchase. This property here is in a capital city. It is in a CBD location. Purchase price $215,000. Previous sales surrounding this in the same street, like literally like next door, right next door, sold for 300. Revaluations are coming around the 270s and stuff like that at the moment. Rent per week, I think you get around the 300 to 330 per week. If you want to give it a bit of tidy up, you'll get a bit more. So on that note, over to questions and answers. I'm going to answer a few of your questions. I know I've gone over by a lot this afternoon, or this evening. So I will answer a few of your questions, and with those questions that are in here, I'm going to get my team to pull out a few of those questions and make into individual YouTube videos for you guys. So my two properties were cross-securitized, selling one off up to the 4th extension on settlement because of the bank, not straightforward at all. Yes, if you purchase your properties, cross-collateralize them, you're at the mercy of the bank. The bank will not let you sell the property until they revalue your other property that's attached to it. So it makes your life hell for disposal of the assets. Steve, all these examples of people getting 10+ properties a year, what are they doing that we are not? How do we get to do that? Obviously, that is everyone's situation is different, but there is more that we can do. Good question. We're on the road to being able to push forward for that. We did buy 4 properties in the last sort of 6 months. We're pushing forward to get you there. Do you do options on properties? What do you think about that mode of investing? I don't actually do options, but I do delayed settlements. So sometimes I'll go and buy properties, put down a 10% deposit, and yeah, with those properties, I'll settle them in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years time. So it's yeah, I do delayed settlements, but I don't do options. Tom, I know you're saying interest rates cannot rise. However, what is the possibility of them attempting to rise them if we were to predict? And I know you love predicting. When should we have liquidity ready to take advantage of a potential crash? Looking at interest rate rises, I did always say that they could try and push them up, but they won't have any chance. Just recall, Tom, you were in a live event going back in February of 2019 that I did, and I said in February 2019 that the interest rates would come down not before 90 days and not after 120. So it was a specific range of 2 months where the interest rates would come down. They came down on the 4th of June 2019. At the same time, I made that prediction that Philip Lowe guy from the RBA was saying that the next interest rate cycle would be up, which was total bullshit. So when they say in the media that interest rates are going to go up and all this sort of stuff, they're trying to clutch on the straws. But just think about it, right? The government just got $1 trillion worth of debt. Everybody's loaded up to their eyeballs in debt. People are buying houses without eaves on them for $1 million, $1.2 million on little 250 square meter blocks of land. If interest rates went up by 1%, most of the economy will die. They haven't raised interest rates for 10 years. Not once in Australia has interest rates risen in 10 years. It's always been down. So looking at the chance of them increasing interest rates by much is 0%. As for the rates potentially moving up, if they were to increase interest rates, and this is hypothetically if they were, which I think there's maybe like a 10% chance that interest rates could rise up, they would possibly be able to raise them to 0.25% rises. So that would mean a 0.5% interest rate bump up. And at that point, that would be enough to crack the economy and for them to have to reduce them again and to implement mass stimulus packages to push the market back along, because it is a Ponzi scheme out there. The whole financial system is a Ponzi scheme, and they need the property market to be kept alive in order to keep everything ticking along. Are there any regional preferences why more properties are from Queensland? I buy properties everywhere, whether in Queensland, in Sydney, in Perth, in Cairns, in Brisbane, and I even bought a place in Melbourne recently. I bought an office in Melbourne for myself. I'm not a big fan of Melbourne, but I picked this thing up for like 50 grand, so it was pretty cheap. Yeah, I buy anywhere. I bought in Adelaide. I've got some properties in Adelaide that I own myself. Any bulk deals you're working on currently? Always working on bulk deals. I never know by the time I get back onto my phone if I've got a bulk deal there that's wrapped up. I've constantly got about 400 offers out there. I never know from the minute I go to sleep at night, the minute I wake up, or the minute I get up in the morning, to the minute I go back to bed, what will happen in that day. So if you do want to get involved with purchasing properties or getting access to some of those deals, speak to my team, send an email over to the address here, on the email address here, and have a chat. How does a free discovery session differ from a map session? A map session is an hour call with myself where I'll be chatting with you and working through your position and having a strategy session as to giving you guidance and feedback on how to get to where you want to be. A discovery session is a chat with one of my team, whether it be Pat or Gemma or Matt or Wayne or Jeremy, whoever you get allocated to, working through your position. Sometimes the team will come to me and ask for a bit of feedback. Sometimes I'll give you guidance and put you in contact with the rest of my team. So it's not Gemma and Pat and Matt and the rest of the team aren't here to give you advice, but they can put you in contact with my team of professionals. I do have, as I said, this is my floor out here. I've got over 50 staff. I've got an office upstairs. We've got, I don't know, maybe another 20 staff in my office upstairs, and then I've got people nationally in all different areas, whether it be accounting or financial planning or a law firm that I own, or the hotel group. So yeah, there's a lot of team. The difference between the discovery session is you'll be speaking with my team, not myself. I'll be giving you one-on-one sort of guidance as to what I would be doing in your position. You can ask about feedback off. Discovery session is sort of 15 minutes chat, 20-minute chat with my team to work out where you're at, what you're trying to do, and then they'll put you in contact with the rest of my team and put you in the right direction. So yeah, it all starts with a conversation. If you want to speak to my team, it's free discovery sessions. Ask for that. Yeah. Yvette, Nathan, you're such a legend, inspiration to us. My wife and I are planning on getting involved with you guys in the very near future. Is there any way that we are able to get your number like certain others do? Of course, understanding you're an extremely busy guy at all, but just saying it would be the most amazing thing to be able to talk and even meet with you. Regards, Hayden and Yvette. Keep hustling. Appreciate the support, mate. With my phone number, when I call people for a map session, I call them on my number. It's my personal number. I speak to my community. I speak to my investors. Obviously, my investors are very, very important. I only have 24 hours in the day. I try to systemize, have processes and good habits. So, like when I look over my phone, I've literally got. I'm still scrolling. I'm still scrolling, right, on my phone. With any of my number, just my investors have it. I always get back to my investors within 24 hours, and I always give them one-on-one guidance and support. So it's really just available to my investors that I speak one-on-one with. Yeah, but happy to help out and look forward to being a part of your journey and helping you kick ass. Just getting a dry throat after nearly 3 hours of talking. Comment for later. My net worth is 17k short of 1 million. I have 5 properties, including my home. Total debt is 700. Total asset pool is 1.7. Just turned 50 for the first time in my life. I'm having trouble financing another property. All my properties are in my name only, with the exception of one, which is joint. I find all very interesting. The lender's that. I get since the Royal Commission this has changed, your joint property, we have to calculate 100% of the liability. so on and so forth. By way portfolio is positive geared, what am I doing wrong aside from banking with the same bank? And it's not necessarily that you're banking with the same bank, maybe just structuring the loans. Each lender is different. What I would suggest is if you want to have a chat with one of my team, they can put you in contact with one of my finance team. I do know people that are in positions like that. All banks have different ways of assessing the debt and shading that servicing calculator. So some banks will take, if you have $1 million loan and it's 50-50, 95% of the banks will say the debt is jointly and severable to you. So if you've got $1 million debt and there's two people, both parties are liable for $1 million of that debt. However, if you have a certain lender, which might be 1 out of 10 or whatever, that lender will go, okay, well, you're liable for half of that debt, and the other person's liable for the other half of the debt. So it would come down to the structuring of that debt. But if you would like to speak to my team, reach out, send an email to the team or give us a buzz, and my team will put you in contact with who you need to speak to. There are so many questions in here. I'm going to get to them a little bit later. I'm going to get the team to print them off. I will make more videos on this. Scott just wrote here's a final one, 10:30 p.m. on a Sunday night, map session workaholic. That is true. On a Sunday night, I called Scott for the first time. He's got a few properties now under his belt. It was 10:30 at night. I was driving back from Queensland. I was like, I'll call you. Give me something to do, and it fits more into my day. So if you want to speak to me at midnight one night and I'm awake, I still speak to people at midnight. It's not for a map session normally, it's just for a friend of that one, but I do mainly for my investors that I build the portfolios for them one-on-one. Yeah, it's I speak to very, very regular, like it doesn't matter if it's midnight or I was actually speaking to one of you guys last night at about 11 o'clock at night, and I went for a walk. Went for a walk with Ridwan from One Path Accountants. Went for a bit of exercise because we're becoming fat bastards. So yeah. Yeah. With it, too many questions here. Appreciate everyone watching. We've gone on for 2.5 hours. I will get the team to print off these questions and make some videos out of them as well. Catch up soon, and make sure that you guys keep an eye out for next month's webinar. I'm going to do a webinar which is very off the grid, like today is specifically around property and building a portfolio and equity and all that sort of stuff. Next month, I'm going to be doing one on how to survive in the new world that we are going into. It's going to be very fun and very exciting topic of mine that I'm very passionate about. The monetary system is changing. The world that we're living in is changing. We're losing more and more of our rights every day of the week, and there's ways to protect yourself throughout that. Matt just wrote me a question, which is, I can't get precious metals through the Perth Mint as they are out of stock. What is your thoughts on as good as Gold Australia? It's local, so I'll be able to pick it up. Never dealt with them. There is lots of other bullion dealers out there. There's different ways to obtain precious metals. I'm going to be covering off on all different ways, because having currency, like having money, it just keeps losing its value. It has no value. Having specific items of trade, I think, could be very, very important, very crucial for a lot of people that people haven't even thought about. There's a lot of people talking about the jabbies. I don't even know why I'm hiding it, because it's a webinar. No one consents to this. People talking about vaccines. You need to have a vaccine to walk into a shop or to trade business or to do whatever. Monetary basis in the future will be a digital credit system, social credit system, which a digital currency will be out there that everyone has to trade in, and it will be absolutely dog shit. You do not want to play a part of that. You need to protect yourself, and I'll be talking about things very randomly, very, very differently to tonight's presentation. So make sure, if you are looking at, if you feel that something's not right, if you've got these burning desire questions, send them through to my office. I will cover it off in next month's webinar. It will be how to survive the changeover from our monetary system and how to operate in the new world and how to try and survive in a communist sort of system. So look forward to that one, and we'll catch up soon. Take care, guys, and keep being awesome. Bye for now.